I can click the go live button. There we go. All right, and I'm
Mhm.
live now. Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, a couple months ago, we talked about Anarcho-Capitalism. I suppose
Mhm.
you came to me. You wanted to do a round two. Let's go.
Yeah, so here's the thing is that uh now I have a more structured argument and less of a kind of okay, I'm just figuring out what your ideology is, you know? Um and yeah, how about you introduce yourself and then I introduce myself to your base.
Sure. So I'm Liquid Zulu. You can find me at youtube.com/Liquid Zulu. I do videos on philosophy and anarcho-capitalism. And yeah.
Cool. I am foodshops and I just vibe. All right. Um, and you are actually the last one in my chain of current debates against a lot of former topics. So yeah, that's just what I've been doing recently.
Save the best for last.
Um, yeah. So we're sort of closing the loop. Finishing the circle, so to speak. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess my contention is this. Is that I believe, and this is, I'm going to make a claim that I think that the state is justified or even necessary. Because I'll make a stronger claim, right? That it's necessary because even though I recognize that there is a lot of rights that the state takes away, and I also recognize that the state also aggresses on a lot of people's rights. What it seems like to me is that by being born into it, even though you cannot choose, you have to basically make the I guess you have to make the concession that you are taking out a lot of negatives. Um, I mean, you're accepting a lot of negatives of like your freedom in exchange for the protection of the state. Um, yeah, mainly that and some other things and benefits. So, yeah, that's my claim.
Okay, so let me see if I can uh, spring that back. So it would be that if you were born under a state, that it's justified for them to violate your rights because they're protecting you or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yeah.
mean, are they not the criminal we would need protection from? Is a rights violating protection agency not a contradiction in terms?
You said you view the state as a criminal,
Yeah, it's a criminal organization. I mean, we both agree
a
that it
criminal
aggresses upon
organization.
people and violates their rights. That's what it means to be criminal.
So if you are defining criminal in that term, I sort of define criminal in the sense of like if you violate the state's laws, then it would be criminal under that. But we can go with your definition of criminal, I guess, just for the sake of the debate. In that case, yeah, basically, you are born non-consensually under an organization which, I mean, sucks to suck if you're born under, a state that, sucks, right? But if you're to born under like a standard Western liberal democracy, like the way that I am imagining it, then I would say that the trade off is worth it. Yeah, and I have an analogy that I can make as well.
Well, it's clearly not worth it
Uh,
for everyone because there are plenty of people who don't agree to it, right? We agree that it's non-consensual. If the trade-off was truly worth it, then couldn't they just operate consensually?
Sorry, can you repeat the what you just said real quick?
Sure. So, you said that the trade-off is worth it, but I mean, there are people who live under states who don't think that the trade-off is worth it, right? Or else they could just do it consensually. If you believe that the trade-off really is worth it, how about you test that theory and do it on the market, right? Why do you have to force people?
This is mainly because, in my opinion, there are several reasons why we might not be testing it solely on the market. And we need basically a non market motivated kind of state in order to back it up. For example, and here's the thing: I'm not particularly saying that there is no market motivated states. For example, all states are market motivated to some degree, right? However, there are some states that are more market motivated than others. However, it seems like to me that, for example, there are some services that the state provides that are negative in terms of earning money and boosting the economy, but positive in terms of benefiting the people that live under the state. For example, the mail service is one. And another one is, for example, you don't want in a purely market motivated place for a rich person to buy all the firefighters. So yeah, that's two examples off the top of my head.
Okay, so if this state, you would say that these services it provides, if you
Mhm.
agree that they would lose money on a purely market level, then on what grounds are you concluding that the trade is worth it? Because clearly people don't think so, or else they pay for it, right? Yeah, I pay for things that I think are worth it.
Well, because the way I determine the welfare of people who live under an organization isn't based on profit alone. I believe that money can be an indicator towards happiness for people who live under a state. However, I do not think that money alone should be the sole indicator.
Okay.
For example, you can have something at a negative, you can have something at a negative profit, right? A profit loss. Um, However, I would say that the trade off for that profit loss would be worth it.
Okay, but so
Um,
what are you basing the welfare of the people on? Like, why?
sure.
How are you determining that it is indeed worth it to have a state-run mail service, for instance?
Sure. So, for example, I believe that utilitarianism, like general utilitarianism, is the one that I sort of ascribe to. If I have to specify, I would say like a kind of desire theory combined with objective lists. For example, money is a good indicator for buying things that contribute towards your happiness. For example, food or cars or etc. Right? However, money can also be used to buy negative things that also don't contribute to your happiness as well, right? But I would say that a higher priority is just generally protection. I would say protection is the most important part because without that kind of protection, everything else is kind of above the side. And I feel as though that, for example, the mail service, you brought up the mail service, right? Um, Insofar that I think that, at least how we handle government related mail systems in the West, at least here in the US, I think that is a positive thing. So even though it's at a negative, it's cost efficient for the citizens, not for the government, but for the citizens. So yeah, that's what I believe.
Yeah, but why do you
Um,
think that government mail services are a positive thing? Like, how did you um, go from, not knowing about mail services, and then you're like, let's derive what kinds of businesses the government should be running, where it should be monopolizing, what services it should provide. Like, how did you get down to, and then therefore it should monopolize the mail service?
I wouldn't say monopolize the mail service. For example, here in the U.S., the USPS isn't the only, deliverer of mail and packages. Yeah, but regardless, I just believe that a profit loss isn't inherently bad. I would probably make that argument. Yeah,
Okay,
because the way I define bad, if you want me to define bad, if that's okay.
well, no, it's just how do you like, yeah, fine enough. Like I get that you believe that a monetary loss isn't
Mhm.
necessarily an indicator that it's not worth it, but I want to know like the
Yeah.
positive side of that. How did you determine that it is indeed worth it?
Sure. So, if we define good as the fulfilling of desires, where Well, first of all, I sort of want to believe that there is an objective list out there, right? Under my system. For example, people generally want to pursue things like romance, happiness, and etc. Right? We sort of have to concede to that kind of baseline, right? And then after that, after security. For example, I just want to also add physical security on top of that list, right? Another part is that after all of that is done, I believe that fulfilling of desires should be defined as the next part, right? For example, if you want to send mail to another person somewhere else, that is a fulfilling of desires. Um, uh, Now, in my opinion, money, because it is less on my priority list, money is less than the fulfilling of desire, for example, for social contact, like sending mail. So, in my opinion, that is one of the reasons, well, as a broad kind of thing, as a reason why I believe that, the mail system is worth it.
I mean, that's like very very vague terms there. Like presumably you wouldn't think that it's good to have a mail system 10 trillion times larger than the US Postal Service, right? So how did you determine like, oh yeah, this would be a good amount of mail service for the government to provide? Oh, nothing less than that, that would be too little. Nothing more than that, that would be too much. Like how would you get to the figure there? Like, oh yes, this is how much mail the government should be shipping.
Well, that would be just federal budgeting, right? The thing is that I'm not the one who is going to be delegating the task of drawing how large any particular bureaucracy, not even like the mail, right? Any kind of bureaucracy or how big that is going to be. In my opinion, we should just leave it up to our elected representatives, and in order to draw up the budget, and then for them to sort of negotiate and consult experts in order to draw up the boundaries there. It's not my job to do so. However, I believe that ultimately this is still good because it's maximizing the well-being of people inside the state, which is like a good thing.
Oh, sorry, I think we lagged out a little bit there. I believe we got the
Oh,
end of it
really?
though. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to repeat? Sorry.
No, I think I got the end of it. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so right, so these elected representatives, whatever they
Mhm.
say goes. Like if the elected representatives say we should increase the USPS budget by 10% this year, then therefore it is the case that the USPS budget should be increased by 10%. Is that it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
However, I know that this can be a slippery slope where you go, you know what? What if they vote in order to expand it by 10 times? Well, then you simply just try to vote the people out, right?
How would you even determine that you should vote them out if it's the primacy of their consciousness which is determining how much mail service there should be?
Uh, well, they would consult the experts, but I'm not entirely sure what your question that you're asking is. I'm a little bit confused.
So the claim you're making here is that
Yeah.
whichever amount of mail service the elected representatives say, this is how much mail service we should be providing. You're saying that that is the
Mhm.
source of truth for how much mail service should be provided, right? But then if they
Well,
say,
careful, not the sort, not the perfect source of truth. Just one of the sources of truth that I recognize could have negatives, but in comparison to your system, I would say is better. Which we haven't gotten there yet to me kind of questioning your system.
okay, so then what would be the primal source of truth from which these other ones would derive, right? How do you get to this is how much mail service we need to provide?
um, I would say overall, the overall politics of the nation, in addition to the market, right? For example, just because something has a state doesn't mean that the market is gone, right? There are still going to be pushes, and there's still going to be stuff where goods and services are going to be inflating and deflating. In the sense of that, I believe that people will just naturally gravitate towards, okay, if something bad is happening, then we will do our best to spread either propaganda against or for it. And then everything will generally gravitate towards, a better system over the course of time because of, progressive improvements, especially inside of one particular system.
Right, but what would that look like in concrete terms? Like I'm a mailologist and I want to figure out how much mail should be provided. What would be the steps that I would take? I would refer in some way to the overall politics of the nation and the market. But what does that specifically mean?
What is a meologist? Is that like
Maleologist.
somebody
I'm a man who studies
maleologist
male. Yeah, I'm a maleologist.
who's somebody who studies male?
Mhm.
Well, here's the thing: is that in that case, again, I don't know the specific workings of like any of the insider, you know, mail kind of services. However, I would imagine, right, the only argument that I'm trying to make is that uh, generally when it's being left up to the experts and whatever system that they make, because I'm myself is not really an expert in the mail, right? I'm just saying that that kind of task is delegated to that, and that is at least better than just purely determining on a profit-based motive, if that makes sense, right? Because the problem again just comes down to this, right? If it's purely on a profit-based motive, then in my opinion, it's not necessarily the best. For example, the uh, and I wouldn't say particularly the mail, because you can actually convince me that the mail could operate on a profit-based motive and still be workable. But for example, stuff like safety, right? I would say safety is the most important part. Where, for example, if you were to hire security guards, the richer you are, the more security guards you are able to hire. However, it seems like to me, right? Would you also agree that maybe the poor people are unable to protect themselves, just mainly due to a lack of money?
I mean, if you're really, really destitute, then I mean, and you got no friends or anything, then yeah, you're kind of you're fucked, right? Good luck. It's not my
That's the
problem,
problem
right?
I have.
I mean, it's not
Yeah.
my problem. If somebody has nobody who likes them in the world, and they've got no money, no valuable skills to sell to anybody, it's not my problem if they can't defend themselves. It's their own damn fault, you know. Get better, I suppose.
I guess a question I have is this, right? Is that sure, you're not responsible, kind of morally responsible for your neighbor, right? But we're talking about the broader scope of a society. In my mind, we generally want to maximize the well-being of the people inside of it. So if well, I mean, again, this is just according to my system, right? If I say that I want to maximize the well-being of the people inside of it, then yeah, I want a fulfilling of physical safety. But the thing is that that physical safety cannot be satisfied, which is what I find the problem with, right?
So why is the solution to some people might not be able to have someone defend them against like physical invasion of their property? Why is the solution to that to make an organization which routinely and institutionally invades the property of everyone underneath it? How is that a good solution there?
Um, I think I think it's a good solution because typically when the state invades your property, it's because you broke a state law. And that's something, like you said before, sometimes you're just born unlucky and it is what it is. And I think that, if you do something that violates state law, and generally we have, more reasonable state laws, for example, like you don't rob, you don't murder, you don't steal, right? Or anything of that sort, right? When it comes to stuff like that, then yeah, I believe that the state should have a monopoly on violence and the state should be justified in going after you or aggressing upon your property. I believe that is a good argument to make.
What if
Yeah,
the
but
state law that you violated was that you were Jewish? And they're like, that's against the law. Off the camp you go.
yeah, then in that case, it is not really. Then in that case, I agree with you that there can be bad state laws, and there could also be state laws which are incredibly unfair, right? Which is why I specifically try to advocate for when it comes to statehood, it would have to be a Western liberal democracy if I have to choose one. But the thing is that it's more of a necessary evil, if that makes sense, right? I believe a state is a necessary evil, and it's one that we should ascribe to, right? The thing is that for your system, no one is stopping anybody from, let's just say Grugistan, right? Do you remember Grugistan?
Vaguely.
Vaguely, yeah. So basically, Grugistan is another larger invading force, where if you did have a state, let's assume that the state would be able to repel them. However, in this specific case, the state would be, well, there would be no state, right? Because it's in Capistan, where it is a loosely disjointed network of companies who are in communication with each other, from what I remember. However, the amount of time it takes for them to kind of make a military alliance to repel an already prior established hierarchy of military power is too little too late, right?
Well, that's just definitely
kind of,
false. It's a general law of economics that the free market can provide products vastly more efficiently than any central planner can, because Kyrgyzstan has absolutely zero way of knowing how to efficiently allocate its military resources. It doesn't know whether it should buy a bunch of $13 trillion aircraft carriers when it's invading a landlocked nation. It has no way of telling this, right? It doesn't know. Whereas Ancapistan, they're all going to be putting their own skin in the game there. They're going to be losing money if they're investing their money poorly, right? They're going to be going for the most efficient ways of doing it. And I mean, even if we have super inefficient countries now, like Vietnam, it was a commie country, right? They still managed to repel the US, huge military. Afghanistan, the Taliban, they managed to repel the US, huge military. Biggest in the world, bigger than the rest of the top 10 put together, right? It's very easy to repel these grug-brained type invaders where they're just like, oh, bigger stick smash, right? They don't understand, because as they're smacking you with the bigger stick, you've snuck in behind them and you've poisoned them or whatever, right? It's no competition.
I would generally agree with you. However, the problem with your what you just said was that guerrilla warfare, I agree, is useful, when you are countering, Grugistan, right? However, when you are that doesn't mean that Grugistan is unable to take over cells and they're unable to take over units, right? When they are combating a paramilitary group, it's hard to kind of wipe out the entire force from the region just simply because of, stuff like culture at the time, as well as like the recruitment power and et cetera, right? However, I would imagine that because of that, if Grugistan were to continually come back over and over again, sure, it might be hard to, kind of take hold of Afghanistan, right? For one example, I know that one is brought up a lot. However, Afghanistan itself would have a lot of problem trying to prop up, their own development, their own, kind of free market of their own, as well as, all of the stuff that, supposedly the benefits of Ancapistan supposedly stems from, right?
Oh no,
I
like
just have a hard time
these
believing
insurance agencies are going to be very heavily incentivized to protect the trade routes, protect all that stuff, right? Because that's where they're getting their money from. That's what's being insured. So if Kyrgyzstan's coming along and trying to do piracy on these ships, they're going to have a swift response by some of the most powerful organizations on planet Earth, assuming this is like a decently well-established Ancapistan, right? They're going to be fucked, right? You'll have like super space lasers come down and just vaporize their presidential palace or whatever. Good luck fight against that, right? Because we can launch payloads into orbit for like $30 or something, and we can just throw a bunch of space lasers up there and just boom, right? I mean, these insurance agencies are going to control huge swaths of resources, which is what you need if you're going to insure people. You need to have a massive stockpile of resources, and if you're providing the service of security, then a lot of those resources are going to be in munitions, right? And you'll know exactly which munitions are most efficient. You'll be able to spend your money the best, right? This will be a military like you've never seen before. I mean, we've seen things similar to this in the past, like privateers were one of the big factors in the American Revolution, right? They were sailing up and down the coast, destroying British ships left, right, and center, right? These were private ships which were doing this. So it's not like unheard of to have private militaries which are just vastly more efficient than anything the state can put together. The state doesn't know how to be efficient.
Right, but be careful, right? Because you sort of said, superior technology with, this kind of, units moving about and then destroying groups. The thing is that for me, at the very least, what is the point then of having a hierarchical military power if if you say that every single guerrilla force is able to destroy them, because here's the thing, all right, is that does it actually play like that in reality? Is that the reason why, for example, a lot of guerrilla groups are unable to develop technologically, any further than just, what is already priorly established like a decade or 2 decades before, right? Is because their growth economically is suppressed, especially by a larger, more powerful hierarchy. And I'm not saying that, the larger hierarchy is, suppressed by, a lack of market. They still have a market, but it's just a more restricted form of market, right? They have rules, they have laws, right? So it's not that,
So
it's not just like, okay, there's like, it's powerless against guerrilla groups or guerrilla warfare, right?
So these guerrilla groups you could point to in history, like the Vietnamese, the Taliban, these are all socialist still, right? They don't have true market signals or on anything that they do, right? They're not the Ancap insurance agencies or anything like that. That's what I would be referring to. And good luck invading against those guys, right? And the reason why I sort of like you're hinting at this question, so I'll address it. Perhaps you weren't intending it at all. But sort of, then why exactly do we see all of these successful hierarchies? If this is true, if the free market is just so much more efficient at defending itself than any state ever could be, why didn't the free markets win out? And the answer for that is fundamentally philosophy, right? It's the philosophical interpretation of history. Most people acquiesce towards the state. They don't want to have freedom. And that is why they don't have freedom. The second that switch flips and a critical mass of people want to be free, the state has no way in hell to stop them, right? Just as the Bolsheviks were able to take over the largest nation on earth with a minority of the political power, so too could we take over vast swaths of land with a minority of the political power. Because most people just kind of go with the flow. They don't have any explicit philosophy. And if the explicit philosophy of the day is libertarianism, then the state cannot survive. It has no way to survive. And then you can very quickly see massive Ancapistan regions starting to spring up. And these regions will be developing way faster than anywhere else on planet Earth. Right? We'll be fucking going to the Mars in a few days, right? We'll be going out to Pluto. We'll be going out to fucking Alpha Centauri or whatever. We'll be doing all sorts of crazy shit. And there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Okay, I don't know. Here's the thing. Okay, I'm not going to try to refute the part where you guys are going to have the capabilities to go to Pluto. Okay, I'm not some kind of astrophysicist who knows the ins and outs of some kind of claim like that, right? But the thing is that you say all of this, right, with all this philosophical stuff, right, where in theory it works like this, in theory it works like this. However, in practice, it just seems like it just points the other way. For example, people give up their rights to the state because they know that the state will be able to protect them. Nobody wants to be a straggler outside of any other kingdom. Even if they are a straggler right there and they think that their freedom is worth it, the moment a bandit gang comes by and then tries to butt fuck you, right? It seems as though you want to have this larger state on your side with their militia and forces to do so, and no amount of argumentation is going to be able to convince the bandit gang sometimes, all right, to be out of it, and that's the problem, right? Is that this baseline desire is not satisfied. This baseline desire, this objective point of physical safety, right? This physical safety is not satisfied.
Okay, well, I would say it's completely false that people give up their rights to the state because they know the state can protect them. Nobody thinks that the state can actually protect them. Everyone knows that it can't. The reason why people give up their rights to the state, or more precisely, why they don't defend their rights against the state, is because they're chronic evaders. They're chronically evading reality. They think they have a malevolent universe premise. They think everything's out to get them. They think whenever they're going to try to do something, they're going to fail, which the psychology comes from their philosophy, right? If they're constantly evading reality, then they're going to be constantly failing at things, and they think they're just hopeless, everything's hopeless, and all they have left is to put their faith in some mystic priest, who we call the government these days, right? They put their faith in this priest, and he says, don't worry, child, I will defend you against the incomprehensible universe that you have no way of understanding how anything happens. That's why people put their faith in government.
Okay. Do you think that people have no idea of the inner workings of government, or how things are decided, or etc.?
Yeah, definitely not explicitly. Most people don't have any sort of explicit philosophy. Most people have never heard the word metaphysics in their life.
Okay. So I guess the problem I have with that is that, how is it that, this kind of concept of statehood has tricked mankind for so long, to the point where, we're not constantly overthrowing it, right? Because you said that the people can reach a critical mass. Eventually, are you talking about like a revolution in that sense? Just a quick. Like a
I prefer the words speaking French as against speaking German, just so I don't set off any alarm bells.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Viva la revolution. All right. Well, in that case, right, that is probably, the reason why people rise up is when generally a lot of very baseline, important things are not satisfied. Like, for example, food security, right? These baselines, then the people will have less and less reason to overthrow the government, right? And I don't think it's a black and white thing. I think that it's very complicated, right? For example, if people have their families and if people have their kids to protect, right? They will do a lot of things in order to sacrifice something for that baseline safety. And even though they are not, and I would like to sort of take this a little bit back a little bit, right? I would rather say, better word, the will of the people is better when they come to this kind of, social contract agreement, some rights in order for the protection of the state, because the state gives you freedoms back, right? The state gives you the freedom to actually argue in the first place, without needing to fear for your life. And even if, there are exceptions where you are going to lose your life, that person is not going to get away scot-free, a good amount of the time, right? So yeah, that's just my point there.
So this sort of core question of, well, how is statehood won out? Surely people are like, they're thinking of these rational ideas. They're weighing their options, and that's how statehood is won. You're wrong, Liquid Zulu. I would say this is completely wrong-headed. You underestimate just how evil people are. The reason why statehood has won out is because Plato won, and then when Plato was starting to die down, then Kant won. Right? That's how statehood has won out. These are fundamentally very evil philosophies. They're anti-reality, they're anti-reason, they're anti-mind, they're anti-life. These people hate achievement because it's achievement. They hate mankind.
Can you hang on to that? Can you hang on to that thought? I got a doorbell. I'm going to be right back. Hold on. Very quick, like 2 minutes.
Shame, I was on a roll. I'll have to get the roll back going.
Sorry, my mom brought me food.
No bother.
I love my mom. Yeah.
Have you got noodles or something there?
No, well, I live by myself, but occasionally, or actually more often these days, she brings me food. Anyway, sorry.
She went to a food shop, you could say.
Yeah, I suppose she did. Yes. Do
Okay.
you know what your last point was? I'm so sorry.
Yes,
Before you,
yes.
yeah, before I
I've
interrupt
got
you,
the
but what
thread
are
in my
you?
mind. So,
Mm,
the reason why it is there's this question of how has statehood won out? How has it tricked these people? Surely these people must be coming up with good reasons. They must be weighing their options and deciding, you know what, all things considered, the state really it's better than the alternative. I don't want to be a barbarian or whatever. You're underestimating just how evil people are, and most people do this. Most people underestimate just how evil the state is. The state tells them openly, and well, it's not the state doing this. It's the philosophers. They're telling them openly that they hate life, they hate reality, they hate reason. They think that man is worthless, man is doomed to fail, man is worth completely in the dirt. He's suffering from original sin. He's evil because he achieves. He's evil because he is brilliant. They hate mankind. They want to destroy mankind for the sake of destroying mankind. That is the philosophy here. And we get this from Plato, first of all. Then Plato starts to die down as we enter the Renaissance and we get the Industrial Revolution. And then Kant brings it back. And then that's why Kant is the most evil philosopher of all time, because he was even more consistent than Plato in his rejection of reality. And on this premise, where mankind is worthless, where man's mind cannot apprehend reality, where everything he sees is an illusion, where can you turn, right? All there is left to turn to is just, well, this mystic priest said this, and you know, he's saying that he hates mankind, that he wants me to suffer, that he thinks the environment should be sacrificed to, that we should stop using fossil fuels, even though I know that energy is required for human life. He's saying all these things. He's saying that I should sacrifice my life, but maybe he's got like a good motivation. I don't believe that people are that evil. No, they are. They are that evil. This is how statism is won, through philosophy.
mm.
And that's how statism will fall, through philosophy. Because thank goodness Ayn Rand was born, and then I was born later, so I could make her ideas a little more
Okay.
consistent.
All right. Um. Okay. Do you, do you define? Do you think that again? I don't know how you define evil, but usually when I think of evil in my book, I think of somebody who is like intentionally and knowingly, trying to bring about harm, or they're promoting an idea that brings about harm on purpose, right? That promotes negative well-being instead of positive well-being. But do you? And sorry, I'm sorry. This is like because I'm actually fascinated by the way you think about Plato and Kant, right? Because weren't didn't they try to generally have mankind's best interests,
No.
not like even though a method could be wrong or evil in your opinion, right? Like it's not particularly like, oh yeah, they were aiming for destruction of humanity. You're talking about aiming for destruction of humanity. That's what you're talking about, right?
So on Kant explicitly, he wasn't going for humanity's best interests or anything. His whole ethics is deontology. It's duty ethics. It's you should do this because it's your duty, not because it's good, not because it improves anybody's lives. It's because it's your duty. That's why you should do it. That's his big innovation in ethics. We have it with the Stoics, a little bit of a duty ethics. You know, there's some amount of duty ethics after the Stoics leading up to Kant, but Kant was like really explicit with this. No, you do this because it is your duty. It doesn't have any positive effects. There's nothing good about it, right? It's just your duty. And if it kills you, if it kills everyone, if it makes everybody worse off, if it violates property, whatever, it's your duty. So do it.
Okay, that's much like a Confucianism, yeah, I guess, because that is also very much a duty-oriented kind of philosophy, right? Like you're honor bound to serve your king and country.
Mm.
Um,
And so
yeah.
to add on to that, because I believe you asked two questions there and I missed one of them.
Mhm.
So you were
Oh, sorry, I even forgot what the other question was. If you could,
I think you were trying to interrogate my notion of like applying evil to these people, saying that they're evil, and using sort of a broad sense of evil. I don't think evil necessarily has to just apply to like these big sweeping actions that we see, like it kills like half a nation or whatever, right? Evil is fundamentally it's rooted in the fundamental choice of humankind, which is to either orient your consciousness towards reality or to invert it back in itself and to evade reality. Evil is evasion. That is the fundamental point. Whichever choice you're making, if you're making the choice, well, should I study for this test, which I know I need to study for, or should I, go out and have dinner, right? It's evil to choose to go out for dinner. If you know that you can see with your eyes, you can see that it's better for you to, better for your life to go and study for this test, it's evil for you to evade this, right? And so evil is fundamentally ignoring reality, and the greatest evader of all time is Immanuel Kant. He built up an entire philosophy because he wanted to keep God around. So he wanted to shield God from reason, and he knew he couldn't do it with reason, right? So he made this whole philosophy where it's all about minimizing reality, pushing reality away. You can't know reality. Reality isn't even a thing. And, that's what Hegel did. He was like, well, this noumenal world, this real world, you can't even talk about it. You can't say things in themselves, because what is things? That implies quantity, but quantity is phenomenal, right? You can't say thing about the noumenal because that implies existence, but existence is subjective on Kant, right? You can't even say that there's something out there that then causes you to have these phenomenal impressions, because causality is also phenomenal on Kant's view. It's subjective, right? So Hegel just did away with the noumenal world, and he had only the subjective part left. That was the core of Kant, really. And what do we get from that, where everything is just subjective? Well, we get polylogism off of that, right, where it's just my truth and your truth, right? We have Aryan logic as against Jewish logic, right? We have bourgeois logic as against proletarian logic. Every single massive disaster, every genocide of the 20th century, thank Kant for it.
I sort of want to hone in on a very specific point there, because you said a lot. Do you think that theory? Sure, I can see that, when just put on paper and trying to push some kind of unquestionable logic forward, right? When it comes to stuff like theory, do you think that when applied in practice, it doesn't work out currently for us? We seem to be doing fine, right? According to that kind of, statehood theory, right? I'm not talking specifically about Plato or Kant, right? For example, we're able to have generally, good security, right? In the liberal West, at the very least, we're generally able to, be able to talk like this, right? We're not really in danger from any barbarian invaders, right? Just like the Golden Horde or the Mongol Empire did back in the day, right? The thing is that I would like to pose a question. In your Ancapistan, if a country, not a country, listen to me. Sorry, because I sort of interpret one of your enterprises to be a country as well, because yeah. But anyway, putting that aside, right? What's there to stop one of your Ancapistan enterprises that owns territory from simply just aggressing on another enterprise that is right next to it, I guess?
Well, on the immediate level, what would stop them from aggressing on it is they know they're going to get into a war, and that war is going to cost them a whole lot of money. It's going to be very bloody, and they're going to very quickly, if you're starting a land invasion of anywhere, you're going to be very quickly trespassing on a lot of different people's properties, and you're going to piss off like every other insurance agency, and you're going to be wiped off the face of the earth, right? But more fundamentally, why do they choose to aggress in the first place? Why do people aggress? And they aggress because they're evaders, right? They're ignoring reality. They're pushing reality away. So if you fix the philosophy, you fix everything, right? Everything descends from philosophy. You don't have people out and out going, I'm going to be a barbarian, I'm going to aggress against people. You just don't have that. And you said there that the state seems to be doing fine. We have generally good security. I mean, do we? Do we have generally good security? You step out your house and you go within 100 miles of any ocean border of the US, and they set up an immigration checkpoint in hundreds of miles from the coast, nowhere near any border. And they're like, hey, we're going to search your whole car, and you have nothing, you can say nothing about it. And we're going to take, if you have money on you, we're going to take that money because we think it is used in a crime, and we're going to try the money. We're not going to try you. You have no way to defend yourself. We're going to try the money and see if the money is guilty of being used in a crime, and you have nothing to do about this. Or we're going to be using civil asset, that is civil asset forfeiture. But the other one, where eminent domain, that's it. Right, we're going to do eminent domain, and we're going to take your house because we want to build a highway here and get fucked. Right? There was clearly invasions. And you say we're generally able to speak freely. Well, not in my country. So, somebody in my country made a video where their pug did a Nazi salute, and he was facing like jail time for that potentially, right? And they had him on trial for years, and they ended up thankfully fining him because the political fallout was so huge. But not everybody's so lucky, right? Plenty of people are in jail right now in my country for saying words. So I don't know about the we there. You said we can generally speak freely. We can generally have these conversations. I certainly can't. And you say we're not in danger from barbarian invaders. Well, tell that to the people at Waco, Texas, right? On Carmel Ranch or whatever it was, Carmel Mountain, right? They had a bunch of barbarian invaders, which were wearing big badges on their chest which said ATF. And the ATF, they said, we suspect that you've got guns in there. Even though they did have guns in there, but so what, right? And somebody said, well, we think you've got, we saw you having grenades. And they said, well, they're prop grenades, right? You see this, there's a gun stores where it's like a prop grenade and you pull it and it says like a joke inside, whatever. And that's what they're buying it for, right? And they invited, they knew that the ATF was spying on them. They invited them to say, hey, come on in, just come on in, and we can do this reasonably, right? Just look, it's open to the public. You can come on into our ranch and you can see what's going on. And the ATF decided, we're gonna take that offer, we're gonna put it over to the side, and instead we're going to burn your children alive, and we're gonna gas them with cyanide, right? That's a barbarian invasion right there. I don't see how exactly they're protecting those people.
Sure. So you have to keep in mind, all right, as well, that I kind of know the second situation. I think I've heard of that one. It's because you're kind of excluding from the fact that, they're generally considered a cult, right? Sure, they operated on their own. They kind of, had their own kind of thing. And in a way, you can sort of view them as like a minor state inside of a state or something like that, right? But the thing is that the government decided, in accordance to itself, that there was plausible reason in order to raid somewhere. Sure, it went terribly. And from what I know, the ATF was criticized heavily for it as well. So this is one of the trade-offs that we have to make, in the sense that we have to allow the government to also make mistakes as well. Not every single government is going to make the perfect, absolute best defense system and won't aggress on your property, unwillingly, right? For example, here in the US, you need a court warrant, right, in order to, search your home, right? Generally, assuming that you're not like SWAT team, worthy, right? But even then, right, when it comes to like a SWAT team, generally they have good reason to believe, hey, by the way, you might be holding hostages or running like a drug den or something, right? And this is one of the trade-offs that we have to, kind of give away, right? But meanwhile, in your world, in my opinion, right, there's nothing stopping from, a neighboring Enterprise B from taking over Enterprise A, especially if they have a larger army, a larger, kind of money source as well, right? A much, much larger. The sovereignty of any defending enterprise will just be overtaken. Especially if they both use stuff like guerrilla warfare and et cetera like that, right? And no amount of argumentation, in my opinion, will be able to convince them.
So you said something interesting there. You said, under my system, nothing stops the larger army with the bigger guns and more money from invading people. But isn't that exactly what the fucking US government does every single day of its operation? right? Under your system, where we have this gigantic agency with a monopoly on enforcement of law, what stops them? And you say, well, the government decided there was plausible reason to invade somewhere. Fucking whoop-de-doo, right? The Nazi government, the Germans, right? They decided there was plausible reason that the Jews were going to destroy the whole world, right? So they decided the rational solution is clearly that we have to wipe out the Jews, right? I disagree with them, right? I disagree that the government says so is not the source of law. I don't think that's correct. I agree with the prosecution at the Nuremberg trials. You know what they said? The prosecution was saying, well, yes, it might be the case that under German law you are allowed to kill Jews, because that's what the defense were saying. They're saying we were just following the law. Well, the government said this is fine. The prosecution were telling them, well, yeah, that might be the case under German law. But there's a higher law. And that higher law says you're not allowed to murder people. I happen to agree with the prosecution. I don't know why you're such an ardent defender of the defense there.
Sure. So the problem I guess I have with that is that, first of all, I already agreed that, the concept of statehood is like a necessary evil. Sure, you could be born into Nazi Germany, right? And Nazi Germany could commit terrible, terrible crimes against groups of people, right? But generally, if you look at history over time, horrendous things have been done by states, like genocides, but we are still, on average, improving over time, right? For example, here in the US West, right? Or here in any European country, excluding, let's just say, excluding, Bosnia, at the time, all right? The genocides are fading away. They're fading away, right? According to our definition. They're no longer, it seems to be that history kind of wins over evil in the course of this direction, because people become more self-aware, science flourishes, people get more research, and people are generally more interconnected in a way, both economically and, morally as a society. I just don't see any need in order to pursue some kind of Ancapistan kind of thing where, oh yeah, this system is for a solution for a problem that is rapidly diminishing, So yeah, what you define as aggression, I define as justified violence, it's justified to me.
Playing on that you're saying, well, this is justified violence. This is justified violence. I assume you're a relatively well-educated person. You're growing up in a Western democracy where we're supposed to have justice and all these things. I'll describe a similar Western democracy for you. This Western democracy had a very well-educated public. They had all their needs met. They were on the forefront. All the liberal magazines are talking about this country. They're saying this country is brilliant. They're way ahead of everyone else. This is the heart of progressivism. They're going to beat us out soon enough if we don't follow their lead, right? And this country that I'm describing here, it's pre-World War II Nazi Germany. Look at certain newspapers. They have archives going back to the 1920s, and you can find what they're saying about Hitler. They were saying we need Hitler to save democracy. We need Hitler to save everything, right? Hitler is going to do it all. Hitler is brilliant, right? And it's these well-educated people, these progressive-minded people who believe that they're doing something great, right? These are the people who then cheered and laughed and were in awe at the brilliance of gassing millions upon millions of Jews to death. It's these well-educated people, these officers in the military of a Western nation. They were dropping the Zyklon B pellets down those air ventilation shafts, right? These were scientists, or a lot of them were, right? And the US really isn't that different to how Germany was before the Nazis. Right, you would be shocked how easily it is, how easy it would be for the US to go the exact same way. We have all of the philosophical ammunition built up for it already, because Germany, Kant was a German philosopher. He got Germany first, right? And that's why you see Germany, and Marx was a German. He went over to Russia. A few decades later, Russia falls into horrible genocide again, right? What happened with Dewey? Dewey, who was a Kantian, he went over to the US. He brought over a bunch of other Kantians with him. And Kant has been taught in the US universities for decades. The US is in a astoundingly similar situation to Germany pre-World War II. You underestimate how evil people are. Within our generation, we could be turning to genocide very easily, right? The only antidote to this is Ayn Rand was born, right? Thank goodness Ayn Rand was born, because now we have something pushing back against the Kantians. There's still a lot of philosophy 101 students out there who say that man is worthless, man has no reason, man can't know anything, man must turn himself towards the group. He has different logics. We hear this all the time. This is black logic. This is proletarian logic. This is bourgeois logic. We hear it all the time. You're just speaking from a white viewpoint, right? What is that if not polylogism? And what was the basis of the German genocide? It was polylogism.
Now, here's the thing, is that I'm not going to deny, right? Like, for example, I'm not going to deny that we were quite close to fascism. If it were the case that, if Trump was basically, elected again, right? I know I'm trying to cite like a specific example, right? And I did actually fear, the fall of democracy, here in the US when January 6th happened as well. And here's the thing, is that yet here, right now, we still hold up strong. The US still exists. The three branches of government, they are, even if a party takes control of all three branches of government, that does not necessitate the fall of democracy, even if the party's goals is to subvert democracy. What it seems like to me is more like statehood is an imperfect concept that is continually improved. And even though we came close to, kind of the Weimar state, right? We didn't really surpass it, or at least not yet, right? We're not, I'm not gonna make this age like milk, right? So here's the thing, is that at the end of the day, we're comparing this to your system, right? Because I believe that we have a prior established system that's been tried and proven, right? But your system have historical precedents, specifically, in my opinion, rooted in feudalism, in the Middle Ages, in guerrilla warfare, in the Taliban in Afghanistan, right? So the thing is that and the Viet Cong, right? The thing is that with these kinds of concepts, these aren't exactly the best examples to point to, in my opinion. In my opinion, my examples are better. My examples have good bureaucratic systems and etc. So, yeah.
So my system isn't rooted in the Taliban or the Viet Cong or anything like that. I was giving an example earlier about
I recognize
that guerrilla warfare is effective, right? So I mean, you're saying that we're straying towards fascism because we're losing our democracy or whatever. I mean, Hitler was democratically elected. I don't think democracy is a good thing at all. Democracy, in fact, incentivizes worse and worse and worse people to come in. It pushes people towards high time preference governance, which means governance where they are sucking as much blood out of the nation as they possibly can within their 2 terms in office. Right, that's what democracy incentivizes. So a monarchy would even be preferable to democracy, fundamentally, right? So I would disagree with that. You're like, well, we're losing our democracy. I disagree that would be a bad thing.
It's actually funny that you say that, because in my opinion, the feudal states back then, or at least how the old world conquerors, they saw themselves, right? They wanted to make a name for themselves, be warrior poets written in history. I actually view them closer to Ancapistan. And probably they are one of the best examples of Ancapistan, because back then we didn't really have nuclear deterrent. We didn't really have the one button and then everybody blows up button, right? What it seems like to me is that no matter how smart humans may be, no matter how much they reason out, there will always be conquerors that will roll over a nation, who, it seems like, at least to me, that even if you don't have a democracy in these kinds of feudal countries or the old world, kind of etc. Right? Seems like right now, at the very least, liberal democracy seems to kind of prevail, right? As a more stable system that lasts longer than just 3 dynasties, right? And are more interconnected in a lot of ways as well. So I believe that makes a stronger point in my argument.
So fundamentally, these conquerors, they're another breed of parasite, right? They suck the blood of people. The only way they can do this is through what Rand calls white blackmail. It is through the sanction of the victim. The parasites of all sorts, they can only ever do their parasitism if you let them, right? No man is like, we don't have like some sort of Omni-Man or Superman type person who can just, he's so powerful that he can control anybody and he can destroy anybody in his way. Right? That doesn't exist. How does somebody like an Adolf Hitler take over vast swaths of Europe and kill millions of people? He doesn't do it on his own. He does it because people are willing to follow him, right? And people aren't willing to resist him strong enough. So these conquerors, there might always be people who want to be parasites, right? They want to be conquering people, sucking their blood. But how do they roll over a nation, in your words, if nobody in that nation is going to follow them? Do they have like superpowers? Are they demigods? No, they're just people. They need to have people going along with it, or else their occupation just simply can't happen.
Sure. So the thing is, to me, at the very least, true. I don't know about this entire analogy to parasitism. However, what it seems like to me, at the very least, is that here's the thing. I have a question for you, actually. Is the fundamental difference between, an Ancapistan country, old medieval feudal state back then, right? Other than don't say technology or anything like that, right? Its core fundamental values. Like what is the difference there, right? Because you call them parasites, but I would say that even in your reality, they would be unable to kind of resist a larger power, a new kind of Hitler coming in from his own Ancapistan sector, right? A new kind of Stalin or Mongol Empire, right? From gathering up their troops and then taking over anybody who doesn't seem to have nuclear weapons either, right? So I just don't see that any different from our current world or from the Middle Ages that we had in the past.
Right, so the difference between the Ancapistan, which again, I don't believe that their Anarcho-Capitalism is about a system.
Well, just a region. Just listen. It's just a general geographical region in which your thing kind of happens.
Sure. So in some sort of like a free market, what would distinguish a free market from feudalism? Well, fundamentally, the feudal lords they weren't obtaining their lands through homestead, right? They were obtaining their lands through violent conquest, and they would invade other people's lands and take those lands, and there's nothing people could do about it. And they have state monopoly grants. This is your fiefdom, right? Your fief is in this area, and that's what you have. And you don't even have to go out and homestead all of it. It's just all yours, and you get to decide what people can do there. This is a monopoly grant fundamentally. It's nothing to do with the free market.
So in that case, I kind of disagree, right? Because the thing is, sure, back then, they didn't really have the internet or, some kind of app where they would go, you know what? These things are, kind of raising in price and then also going down in price and et cetera, right? But instead they had like horses and merchants that would travel from town to town in order to barter, right? There is a kind of market there. And it is not necessarily the freest market because, the kings would impose laws and I'm sure taxes as well on the merchants, right? But the thing is, in your system, right, regardless or not if the market or the free market is there, there's nothing stopping the big boy from swallowing up the little boys at all. Okay, that sounds weird.
Then
okay,
it wouldn't be a free
you get what
market. Like, it's not a free
Hmm?
market if I can just decree, hear ye, I own all this land. No, I have not homesteaded it. But if you do anything on this land without my say-so, then you're getting a sword through the neck. That's not the free market.
You mean when I am questioning your Ancapistan, right?
Well, so you were
The
trying
larger
to
fish.
draw an analogy between some sort of free market region with
Hmm.
feudalism, right? And I was drawing out why those two things are fundamentally distinct, and it's
Yeah.
because feudalism is a hampered market, whereas the free market is an unhampered market. You can't square this circle.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is that it is less hampered than you might think it is, because in your system, or at least more unhampered or hampered that you think it is, right? Because in your system, why engage in the free market at all when simply the larger fish could just swallow the smaller fish? That's it. It's just physical power. It's physical strength. This person has more money anyway, so they can have better stockbrokers, better traders, better machines as well to handle automated prices, right? And then at the end of the day, they're also going to have a larger military force as well, right? But
So,
at least in my system, we have an overarching state that has more power than the business because they have laws in order to attack a business. And even then, they can't just attack a business willy-nilly. They have to pass legislation in order to attack a business, right?
so you
So,
asked the question, why engage in the free market within, if you're in a true free market, why engage in that? And
mhm.
it's fundamentally the law of comparative advantage. Even if you can, let's take the case of the surgeon who might himself be a very good typist. He might be very good at typing things. He might be like 300 words per minute or something. Words are flying off his fingertips, right? It still benefits him to hire a typist to type up notes of how the surgery is going and whatnot, or take calls for him, have a receptionist, right? The reason why it benefits him, even if this typist is worse at typing than he is, worse at being a receptionist than he would be, he's vastly more productive relatively to himself in surgery. So if he spends if he's taking up some time doing receptionist work, then that's less time that he can spend on being a surgeon. It benefits him to maximize the amount of surgery he can do. So it benefits him to hire someone who's worse at being a receptionist than he is to be his receptionist. And this is why everybody should engage in the free. It gives you massively more opportunities, right? I would never. I mean, this is the classic iPencil, right? I'm sure we're all aware of iPencil by Leonard Reed. It's
No.
so it's like this it's like this genealogy of a pencil where it's like, I am a pencil and here's my family tree, right? First you have to collect the wood, then you have to do like so many millions of steps to make a pencil that you can't list them all out. Nobody on earth knows how to make a pencil. No one person knows how to make a pencil. And a pencil is very simple, right? The only way, something as simple as a pencil, no single person can make it. Think about the internet. Think about the computer that you're using right now. Think about that microphone. Think about all of this. No, it must take so many people. It must be impossible, right? But it's not impossible because we have this thing called the free market. That's why you engage in the free market, because it gives you these seemingly impossible things, these seemingly magical things, right? But of course, they're not magic. Somebody knows how to do each step of that, right? And somebody's done it. Somebody's directed their mind to produce that thing for you. And you can acquire it for like a couple hours worth of work, right? This is brilliant. That's why you engage in the free market.
Well, I agree with you. Okay, only in the sense of that, if there's a demand to be, met, you need to be able to also fulfill that position, because even if you yourself know how to, for example, make a pencil, because here's the thing is that again, I don't really get the entire pencil thing because there is people out there who know how to make a pencil from scratch, right? But the thing is, right, because I get your point, right? The point is that if you need the duties to be met, you'll hire them, right? And then they will do, that part for you specifically, so then your overall process can be improved, right? Now, the thing is, you can do that under our current system. You can do that under statehood. You don't necessarily need to kind of, resort to an entirely new system in order to manufacture things or to manufacture, any kind of product overall. It seems like to me that when you're trying to reinvent the wheel, you're just going to end up, coming up with like a wheel that is missing its spokes, So that's what it seems like to me, right?
I mean, you say missing its spokes, but as we've already established, the free market is vastly, incalculably more efficient than the state. To the extent that you have any sort of statism, you have socialism, right? And the socialists, they run up against the economic calculation problem. They don't know how to be they don't know how to be efficient because they don't know where they're being inefficient. They don't have profits and losses. They don't have these price signals because they control the whole line of it. They control everything. They don't have to pay for whatever they're doing, right? Because they're losing on it. It doesn't matter, right? So it's sort of ludicrous to have this sort of assumption, like, oh no, it's fine if we just have the free market over there, and then it'll all be okay. But in some areas, we need to have the state. Like, why? Why do we need to have the state there? It's still going to be more inefficient, right? It's not going to be as efficient, and they don't know what they're doing, right? They're going to be making insane decisions, like, who knows? Did we need $13 trillion poured into developing a new type of fighter jet? They don't know. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows, right? And this is the same with every single state program. Every single one. They don't know whether or not it's a good idea. They can't know. Socialism is impossible. You cannot calculate. You cannot decide where it is that you're being efficient and where you're being inefficient. It's a fantasy you're providing me here.
Okay, I just want to clarify real quick. I'm not advocating for socialism. Okay, all right.
Yes, you are. You're just limiting your socialism, right? You're just saying, oh, socialism over the mail services and over providing defense and over these sorts of
socialistic concepts, sure. But overall socialism, I feel as though is different because you're talking about something along the lines of a planned economy, right? And
you want to really plan how exactly it is that we're going to be fighting mail, and how it is that we're going to be
I only want to plan enough so then it allows enough flow in the free market to do its thing, but not.
How do you know how much you should plan?
Not too much to the point where there's a problem.
How do you know how much you should plan? You don't have access to the price mechanism, right? So you can't use that. So how do you know? Well, we should monopolize. Well, sorry, not monopolize, right? Then we should have a socialist production in these areas and do this much socialist production, but no more. How do you know that? Because you don't know when you're making a loss. You don't know this.
I would say that typically countries will start at a baseline of the free market, but they will only apply legislation up until, okay, we need this legislation. Absolutely. Legislation requires work.
How do they know that they need it absolutely?
Power, right?
How do they know that they need it absolutely?
Of course. If it comes down to a reason, for example, taxes, right? The state needs taxes to run. The state needs taxes in order to build roads. Mm-hmm. The thing is that it seems as though, right, we only apply legislation only as needed. For example, some other company that's exploiting some kind of small business owner, right? When it comes to stuff like that, it seems like to me is that we don't apply legislation, we don't make laws on non-existent problems.
Right, but how do you? Right? So how are you determining when it is that it's needed? How are you determining, well, the state needs to do this thing? By what means are you determining this? It's not through economic calculation. So how else?
Like I said before, typically, I think the way that governments these days run is on utilitarianism. I don't think that, they are based on, the cost of money alone. I'm sure that money is a part of it, right? But for example, you would be able to accept some kind of inefficiency in order to protect people's rights. For example, I think this one is a bit more prudent, right? Intellectual property, right? Is that when you have something like, I'm triggering on the points, I'm sorry, but like for example, if you have a small inventor, right, Nikola Tesla, let's just say that, right, and he invents something, and he doesn't really patent it, or he doesn't really, go out of his way to intellectually like property secure, his particular invention. Anybody could come along, all right, copy that idea, put it into its workings, and then sell it at a far, far better rate than he ever did, right? They have more workers, they have more, people working at it, or whatever. In your system, it seems as if, even though it's trying to build upon innovation of capitalism, it actually runs counterintuitive, because under your system, from what I know, is that you're against intellectual property, right? But the thing is that you don't really support individual innovation like that, right? You do not even for small groups, because you don't have the state to protect you. You don't have the state, right? So yeah, it just seems like wholly inefficient, right? Instead.
So with intellectual property, now that you've touched on this, if Tesla invents something and it's very easy to replicate,
Nikola Tesla, not the company. Sorry.
Yeah.
No.
It's very easy to implement this new invention, and he didn't keep it secret at all, and he's just published it to everybody. If he can't make money on this new invention that he's come up with, boo fucking who, right? It's not my problem. His failed business model isn't my problem, right? It just ain't my problem. So then, how will people innovate? Well, people innovate all the goddamn time without IP, right? You do not require IP for there to be innovation. In fact, IP is a disincentive on innovation, because the second you invent anything, the second you do any sort of improvement, guarantee you're violating some patent. We've probably violated 16 different copyrights in this stream right now. And this is what companies do. The big companies, they hire lawyers who are just on retainer, and their entire job is to just build up a massive stockpile of patents. And they'll have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of patents in their repertoire. And then they can go to war with other companies. Let's say Sony sues Apple for making a phone with like curved corners, right? Because they made the phone with curved corners first. Right? Then Apple says, okay, buddy, let's tussle, and they start suing Sony for 52 different things that Sony has infringed on. Then Sony comes back with another 100 or so, and then they're just lawsuits back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then eventually they settle out of court. They're like, okay, we'll do a cross license. You can do your phone with curved corners, and we'll let you do this, and yada yada yada. And who loses in all this? It's the little guy. It's the little inventor, like Nikola Tesla. Because he doesn't have tens of thousands of patents that he can go into patent wars with. That's only the huge companies. So IP, because it's a monopoly grant, right? You can predict this right off the bat, and it is true that it tends to grow companies, expand them far beyond what the free market would allow. Because as the company grows, it starts running into the ECP just the same as any state would. It starts being less and less efficient internally. But this bubble can blow up way beyond proportions if they have monopoly grants, which is what IP is. It's not a property right. Fundamentally, it just isn't a property right. It is a negative easement. In the original Statute of Anne, it was a letter of patent. It was just described as a monopoly grant. This was understood, right? It's only later that we have it. Now, well, this is actually a type of property. And then, we have all sorts of horrible, horrible subversions coming from that. It's not property. It's monopoly grant. And that's why you ask any communist, and you go on Twitter, and they're all like, oh my God, property is theft. It's awful. It's awful. Except for intellectual property. We want to keep that. It's horrible that people plagiarize artists or whatever. We need to destroy AI, right? Why is it that they seemingly adopt this contradictory stance between property and intellectual property? Because intellectual property isn't a property right. It just isn't. It's a monopoly grant. They love monopoly. They love it so much, right? And people have been duped by calling it intellectual property.
I guess there's a major contention and then there's a minor contention. All right. So the minor contention is this: is that I think that when it comes to intellectual property and stuff like that, right? I just generally think overall, right? It's good that you're able to come up with something original, even if some company has already made a bunch of fake patents and they will say, you know what, this stuff hasn't been invented yet, but just in case some little guy invented it, all right, that is, something that we can take care of, right? But here's the thing, all right, is that this is the whole reason why we have a court system, why we have lawyers, right? Is that we are able to challenge bigger companies, and the bigger companies are able to challenge you. They have more lawyers, they have more power on their side. I can concede to that, right? However, it seems as though the state is still able to be a fair mediator in that. The state won't always choose the bigger company over the small inventor. And another part is this, and this is probably the bigger contention. Why boo-hoo for Nikola Tesla, right? I want Nikola Tesla to be happy. I want Nikola Tesla for his well-being, his desires to be fulfilled. And if his desire make money off something that was unpatented, right? It isn't his fault that his, invention got taken by another company and then, used unfairly against him, right? It is that in your system, if Nikola Tesla were to exist, right, it seems like anybody else would be able to, take apart whatever he is the moment they get the news of that. So he has to keep it private. But what if he wants to show his friends? The thing is that it seems like to me that you say the little guy, but you are kind of screwing over the little guy. That's the problem, right?
And when I say boohoo to Nikola Tesla, that he failed to make a profit-making enterprise, because the root of money is the principle that men deal with each other, not through violence, not through parasitism, but through amicable trade, on the principle that men own their own property. And if you want their property, you've got to exchange value for value. You won't get that property. You weren't owed that property because they made it and you didn't. That's awful. So boo-hoo to him, and stronger, fuck you for failing at this. Right? And fuck you for trying to patent it. And fuck you for trying to say, I deserve all your property. I deserve it because I didn't make it, and you did, and you figured out how to outcompete me. Fuck you. That's what I say to Nikola Tesla. Assuming he's going for these monopoly grants.
Sure. So, if he's... It's how about I don't think it's inherently that he's going for the monopoly grounds, but it's more like sometimes a small claims to a monopoly is necessary, right? If you want to call it a monopoly, that's fine. But the thing is that when you're, claiming an idea under a state, or other states are respecting each other's, copyright or, intellectual property, right? There's a reason for that. It's because there's an agreement where it says, you know what, if the little guy does in fact invent something, we're gonna, and this person actually makes a claim to it first, we're going to try to protect that. If some other company, goes out of the way in order to take that thing from them, then, the little guy has the right to challenge a bigger company. So it's not just like force makes right or strength makes, whatever the heck, right? What it seems like to me, right, is that when it comes to the little guy, right, getting screwed over, it isn't because he's bad at inventing. He could be an incredible inventor, an incredible scientist, an incredible scholar, right? But it seems like it's just simply he's bad at business. So because he's bad at business, he got screwed over, right? And to me, that's unfair because I don't think necessarily every single inventor has to be good at business in order to beat out like the larger competition. And even if they are good at business, they still can't beat the bigger corporations because the bigger corporations just simply has more resources and has more money. So yeah, I just don't really see what you're talking about, I guess.
Okay, so you think not every inventor has to be good at business to make their enterprise actually profit-making, right? They don't actually have to be good at selling their brilliant invention.
I don't think they should be like that. Well, I don't think they should be like
exactly.
that. Exactly.
You think that they shouldn't have to be good at business, but they should be good at challenging the 16,000 lawsuits that come their way the second they piss off Apple, because Apple has so many patents, and how the hell are they going to deal with it? They have to be experts at law. They have to be equivalent to an entire legal firm's worth of lawyers, right? That's clearly the superior way, rather than just leaving it up to the fucking market, right? This is ludicrous. And you're saying this is pro small guy here. Awful.
Now, here's the thing, okay? Is that regardless or not, we have to choose one of these two systems, okay? And I would rather have the system that is able to have a constantly improving system that is already placed here in reality, where, okay, you have, this kind of, for example, a good example I would say is, okay, I'm sure you know what H3H3 is, and Ethan Klein, right? At some point, he challenged, a copyright thing in court, and he won, right? And at the time, from what I, 70, you can correct me, right? He was a smaller guy, right? So even though it seems as though, in theory, the bigger company will have larger resources in terms of lawyers and so this part already conceded to you, right? But the state and the law is the mediator. And any kind of application in court typically stretches out to all other court cases. So other bigger companies will probably try to back off because they don't want to lose money in a court case, right? The thing is that the law is equal, all right? In the sense of, like, you can have lawyers, you can have suing and stuff like that, right? But compared to your system, it's not a perfect system, right? But compared to your system, I would say that your system is just simply doesn't have the mediator there. The mediator is necessary, right? The judges are necessary in order to interpret the law, in order to decide whether the little guy should have the property or not. And generally, you know what? I do actually believe in the state to, be in favor of the little guy a lot, right? If they have enough
you
to invest.
The biggest guy around, who doesn't have to please his customers at all, because he doesn't have customers, he just steals from everybody. You expect him to be pro little guy. I find that quite hilarious. And you're talking about this situation where H3H3 won out against the bigger channel. I'm not saying that, these companies just go around and do frivolous lawsuits where they're just making up random shit and they're pissed off about you and they just make up enough shit and then they just necessarily win. That is not the claim I'm making. I'm making the claim that you are actually, you're literally violating so many unknown patents and copyrights and everything every single day of your life. Did you ever watch a movie online, right, or on YouTube? You watch something and it had a copyrighted song. Oops, a daisies, you copied that to your computer, buddy. They could sue you for that. If you're an inventor, you invent anything in the world. Oh, that joint in there, that was actually invented by Blagga Blue 10 years ago, and it's owned by Giant Corporation X. That patent was bought up, and you violated several hundred other of their patents. And you literally did violate those patents. You literally did. Because there are millions upon millions of patents in the US that go on the Google Patents database. Like, it's huge, and there are ridiculous patents for things you would never even think about. Like, this idea that it's just, it's not going to be just frivolous claims which aren't true and you can defend in court. You literally will have violated several laws today. Laws, that is, laws from the state. You will have violated multiple of them during this stream, probably.
So, I guess a question I want to pose to you is, do you think this is a continually improving system, or do you think that it has came to a standstill and there's something inherent about it that is wrong? Like, for example, the very inherency of putting a monopoly on an idea, which, by the way, is not forever. Sure, it's a long time, but it's not forever. All right. And even then, if the flaw can be pointed out where, okay, there's a problem with intellectual property, there's a problem with this and that, right? It seems like to me that there just needs to be improvements in the system. We just need to have some kind of intellectual protection for the little guy. And the thing is that I believe, right? I at least believe that let's just give a perfect kind of patent system where no bigger company, let's just say like 50 years later, the companies are this patent system is so perfected that no company can abuse, this patent system. You can't violate it, consistently, right? And, they won't have the grounds to sue you consistently like that either, right? It's only purely for the little guy. What is so inherently wrong about that? About the little guy owning like a patent, right? If the system is like its flaws are worked out.
So you brought up a few points there. So it is first, do I think that this is a continually improving system? No, I think it's a continually degenerating system. You keep accumulating these massive monopolies, right? And these monopolies will tend to keep growing and growing and growing because there's no limit on their growth, right? They can just keep buying up more and more and more monopoly grants until they swallow up the whole system. And so it's continually degenerating, getting worse and worse every single year. And that copyright, the time period keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. Yeah, I think this is getting worse. And you say it's not forever. I mean, I thought it was supposed to be a property right. Property rights are forever. Your property right doesn't just vanish after 90 years, right? That makes no sense. But why is it different for patents? It's almost like it's a completely different type of thing. It's not a property right. It's a negative easement. And then you're saying, why is it so awful for the small guy to have a patent? Why is it so awful for him to have a monopoly grant? It's awful for the same reason why it's bad for a big guy to have a monopoly grant. Anybody having a monopoly grant is evil. They're making a claim on other people's property that they didn't fucking work for. They did nothing to obtain that property. It's not theirs. They aren't owed it. And then they're saying, well, but I thought of this new idea, so therefore I'm allowed to say what you can do with your fucking property. I think that is just evil. It's anti-intellectual, anti-mind, anti-reason, anti-reality. That's why I hate it.
Okay, well, I love the optimal form of it, right? Because we have two diatribes here, rightfully opposed, okay? Is that at the end of the day, okay, we can go on forever about patent this and patent that, right? But in your system, what would be the best way to protect an independent innovator who is, I guess, like all he does is invent. His sole kind of his sole power, his sole kind of ability is to invent and nothing else. He's a great inventor. Like what's to protect them in your system? Because I don't agree that I agree with you that my system is not perfect, right? You can go on forever about the amount of copyright, and I don't even like copyright things either, right? It stops my stream, right? But the thing is that what is it in for your system, I guess?
It's not my fucking problem to protect the independent innovator. That's his deal. He's got to work out how he can innovate and make money out of it. It ain't my problem, right? One way he could do it is get hired by some big company where he says, "Hey, I'm pumping out all these great inventions. You pay me, and I'll pump them out for you, right? And you get the first pick of the litter, right? You get the first mover advantage. That's how you do it. That's one way to do it, certainly. But ultimately, it ain't my fucking problem to decide how he's going to make his business profit, right? It's up to him to determine how to make a profit. But on that, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick, and I'll be back in a second.
Okay, yeah, sure thing.
Hello.
Hey, Zulu, I just have a question. What do you believe is good for human beings? I guess like what do you believe is ultimate? Do you want to maximize happiness, or do you want to maximize like virtue? I guess, or something. Like what is it that you want to maximize or not magnify? Sorry, not maximize. I guess.
What is good for humans is to live. They should be seeking life. Life is the standard of value. That is my stance. So this means be rational, because reason is the source of a man's sustenance, right? You undercut your own sustenance the second you are being irrational or parasitic or anything like that, right?
I guess it seems like there might be some kind of philosophical disconnect that we have, where I think that, even if a lot of people who might win out in a separate society don't actually win out because of state laws, right? That is a worthwhile kind of thing to pursue, because I think that there needs to be sacrifices in freedom to allow for other freedoms to exist. But the thing is that I'm not entirely sure that if you were to try to maximize life, how could you maximize life, under your system, where in my system, at least the little guy is able to make a living and is able to maximize life, and physical safety and physical, kind of thing is protected, at least under the state.
Well, because on my system we have a respect for property rights. We have a respect for reason. If you're violating property rights, you're undercutting the only root of the own root of your existence, right? The root of your own existence. Sorry, that's what you're doing. It's not a good way to live. Man can't live by being a parasite. He can't live by invading other people. He can't live by turning off his mind and expecting his food to come to him. Right? It's just not possible for this to be in any way consistent. Imagine if everybody was a parasite. Nobody did production. Everybody just took from other people. Well, then who pays for that? Who does the production then? Who provides for the system of non-provision? Who produces for the system of non-production? Who does this? Right? If it's truly consistent, right, we should be able to have everybody adopt it. How do you have this system of anti-property rights? How does it work?
I feel as though that you're ultimately advocating for something that does actually, do all the negative things that you just said, right? Like, for example, at least when it comes to the state, when you're poor or something, right? It comes as a cost to the state. Money is not the sole ruler. It seems as if that the state tries to empathize some kind of degree of the ability to pursue happiness, at the very least, right? Like, for example, if you were low on food, and you had food stamps, all right? Yes, I know that's one of my nicknames, all right? Then, at least then the state would be able to go out of its way to provide, some of that food for you, right? Or even in an optimized state where, it's not really, not really having the flaws of today, right? I guess the question is, how would your system be able to provide for the poor? People who are too poor to get an education, even, right?
I mean, you're asking for provision. Someone has to do the providing, right? Someone has to produce these values, right? They don't come out of nowhere. They aren't free, right? Someone has to pay for them. And the question is, who pays for them? You have to have productive individuals to do this. And you are against production. You're attacking the producer. You think he should be taxed for producing. He should be punished for producing, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, right? And that's the old bromide we keep hearing, right? This is evil. Because in your society, where production is evil, you just mooch, 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 and we're going to provide for everybody. Who pays for the providing, right? Who pays for this? It's going to have to be the people producing, so you're punishing them for producing. This is the most evil thing I could possibly think of.
I think what's even more evil, all right, since we're using it so loosely, right, and but I think that if you were to just let a company, all right, with no state laws, engage with the market on its own free will, okay, by own free will, I mean like people like from the marketing department and the executive board, right, and the CEO. On that basis, what's to stop them from also forcing their workers into slavery-like conditions and to kind of maximize efficiency, but keep them barely alive to do so? And at some point, that efficiency, kind of shaves off, and they don't really need to keep them too alive, right? What you have essentially are enterprise-based concentration camps or worker cities, right, of the past, where the workers are entirely indebted to one corporation, and you have yourself a cyberpunk dystopia, right, in a way.
So, I mean, you're asking what stops them from doing this. I wonder what allows them to do this. How could they enslave these people? Because surely, in a rational society, the second they try and enslave a single person, that person's either just going to walk off the job, and he's not going to come back, or you'll shoot them in the fucking face, right? So what would allow them to enslave people? Well, people would have to acquiesce. They would have to say, well, this is a necessary evil. We need to be doing this. This is necessary for security. They provide us with jobs, after all. Without the company, where would we all be? So you shouldn't be so selfish and be concerned about your own well-being in slavery. You should be thinking about your fellow man, your brother man. That's where your concern should be. That is what allows them to do it. And the negation of that is what prevents it.
But that's the problem, is because you are saying all of these negative things about the state, which I think in whole is not even necessarily negative, right? But it prevents exactly the things that you advocate for, right? In that, I believe that, for example, okay, let's just dumb this down to a very, very simple example, right? You have a mentally deficient. There's disabilities, payment, right? There's disabilities related benefits, right? There's the state trying to able to provide that, right? In the optimal world. But in your world, they're screwed because their only value is based off of the market, and it's based off of money. So how could somebody who just simply hits the bad luck, kind of roulette, have to live in your world? And the thing is like, before you say something along the lines of, get fucked, right? I don't like that answer. The reason I don't like that answer is because generally I want to be able to look out for people who are also mentally disabled. Okay, I think it's cruel and mean
I like how you
for
said
somebody to be
also
mentally disabled. And
I like how you said also mentally disabled.
I am. And maybe we both are. Okay, I don't know. All right. It's two modern philosophers. Okay, but
I would say there are plenty of, like, I see videos popping up all the time where it's like, this guy with Down syndrome, he became the manager of his local McDonald's, the people who are very mentally disabled, some of them, they don't take this as like, well, therefore I'm useless and I won't bother and life's against me. They decide, yeah, I'm gonna, this is a handicap, certainly, but I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna try and produce. And boy howdy, some of them can produce, right? All the more power to them. I say they should be allowed to produce. We shouldn't be hampering these people. We should allow them to produce what they're capable of, and we also shouldn't be destroying people and punishing people because they didn't pay the disableds enough. How much should they pay the disableds? Exactly as much as the disableds fucking provide. That's how much they should be paid.
Now here's the thing. Okay. You mentioned disabled people being in charge of McDonald's. Okay. I guess the first question is, where do you think most disabled people end up? Do you think that there's a survivorship bias there? Because I think there is. And number two is this, is that how do you think they actually get to a position where they are able to manage something like a McDonald's? Do you think that they got there magically? No. I think that the state is able to protect them, at least financially or otherwise, up until a point where they are actually able to, be able to become the manager of McDonald's, right? But under your system, if they're born wrong, they're just fucked. And that's it. Some kind of genetic failure, they're just fucked. And I'm not willing to accept that.
The same thing with children, right? A one-day-old baby isn't going to be able to manage a McDonald's. The parents, what they do is they raise this child until such point that this child can be productive. This is the point of raising a child in the first place. And the same can be done if the child is disabled, right? You raise that child until such a point that they're able to produce. And then they can be out on their own and they can be producing. This is why child labor is so brilliant, right? If you're having child labor, people hate this. People hate this so much because they're less productive in their adulthood than like 13-year-olds, and they're sneering at this, and they're so envious, and they hate that children are more productive than them. This is horrible, right? Most people, they can be productive even if they're disabled, right? If they have the correct philosophy in place for them, right? They're not going to be blaming reality. That, woe is me, I have Down syndrome, therefore I can never do anything. They'll be like, yes, I have Down syndrome, but I'll get there. I'm going to still try and produce. I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to rise up the ranks in McDonald's. Right? That is the correct mindset. Even if you have lower mental faculties, right? You can still orient those faculties correctly.
Don't you think that there should be at least some kind of financial protection for somebody with Down syndrome up until the point where they can actually produce something? Like, for example, here's the thing, is that I'll even steel man a little bit, right? Is that in your system, companies are able to have incentive programs for people to be able to learn and for people to be able to enter into programs where they are able to eventually one day be able to produce, right? For example, one thing that I can sort of think out is Chipotle. Do you guys have Chipotle?
No.
No, okay. Don't worry. It's just a American, Mexican, kind of food company, all right? And they once had a program where they said, you know what? We'll help you get through college. We'll help you get through college. And while you're working here, while you're in college, all right, while you're getting education afterwards, all right, we'll pay for you if you win, all right? But the thing is, again, this is a program that a company is not necessarily always going to have either, right? They're not always going to have a program like this, especially when they're going to go through some kind of downtime. And I see that as the only form of protection for these Down syndrome people in your society, other than direct protection from their family. And if in your system, if they don't have a good support network, then they're just on their own. In my system, at least, even though the hassle is a lot, people with these kinds of conditions are able to apply for these benefits. But the thing is that any kind of inefficiency with how these benefits are applied or applicated, right, is just simply a question of improvement rather than a question of complete systematic reform, right? So yeah.
So you're asking there, how are we going to have these guaranteed financial protections for people with Down syndrome, as an example, right? My question would be, who pays for those financial protections? Who is guaranteed, no matter what, we're going to have these protections? Who pays for that?
The people.
Which people?
Everybody. Taxes.
So it's clearly not the Down syndromes because they're on the receiving end, right? So it's the non-Down syndromes.
All the government does is that they reallocate the money that was provided to them, in addition to paying the workers of the government itself as well, all right, to protect the rights, and they need money to protect these rights. And the thing is I believe it's a necessary sacrifice, okay? Somebody from a more advantageous position.
It must be true.
Well, I'm just giving an argument, right? Obviously, I'm not going to just say it as like a faith-based kind of thing, right? I'm going to try to justify it using my
You sure?
my philosophical thing. Yeah, of course. Why would it be faith? Why would it be faith-based? I guess
I'm hearing a lot of faith in this. You know, we went down this line of questioning earlier, and it terminated in, well, the experts will know what to do with the mail, and I just have faith that the experts, they'll know what to do with how much mail the government should be providing. You don't know this. You don't know this. You put your trust in these mystic priests, and you have no clue about their methods. By the way, they have no methods. They can't have any methods. They don't have any economic calculation available to them. They're the government. The expert doesn't mean shit, right? They're making it up as they go along. And you have faith that they know what they're going to do.
Do you think experts really aren't beholden to criticism? They're immune from improvement and etc., right? These kind of specialists, we're not just talking about experts here, we're talking about specialists who are probably gone through some kind of education, all right? They want to be able to sometimes, all right, not all the time, benefit humanity, all right? Meanwhile, your system, which is solely dependent on wealth, all right, it seems to me that either the company is just going to swallow up a lot of these specialists anyway and hire them, all right, or it just seems like to me that there's always going to be little people who are just going to be effed over, right? But the thing is that for you, all right, maybe you don't even ascribe to an overall improvement in well-being, right? But then it seems like to me that you sort of do, because you defined your system of well-being to be the continued existence of life. But how could you have continued existence of life if, for example, if COVID happened, all right, under your system, and you didn't have a Fauci to turn to, because a company already owns Fauci, and only that company, all right, has the secrets in order to, be able to tackle a pandemic such as that, right?
Well, I
How
mean,
do you do that?
If the Chinese Communist Party didn't exist and wasn't performing gain-of-function research, then they wouldn't have invented the coronavirus in the first place. I mean, you're talking about these specialist experts who want to improve humanity. They're trying to improve humanity, right? And the specialists, they specialize in this field. You know who else did that? The eugenicists, right? They were specialist scientists. They knew all about biology, and they were saying, right, it's the case that the Jews, they have these certain structures in their mind, and the blacks, they have a certain structure in their mind, and we need to breed this out of the population. Right? It's the evaluation part. Where are they getting that evaluation from? The facts can be agreed upon. Like, I can agree upon the facts of climate change. I agree that mankind is causing climate change, but where does the evaluation come from? What should we do about it? That's the question. I think what we should do about it is burn way more fossil fuels. That's how we should deal with climate change. I agree completely with the facts that humans are causing climate change by burning fossil fuels. That doesn't change my evaluation, right? Evaluation isn't implied by the facts of the matter.
Would you hasten? I guess you bit down on this bullet before, because I remember this is probably the one part other than Gregerson that I remember the most, okay? Is that when there are people out there, experts and specialists, who are coming from these government-funded colleges, who are willing to, see themselves as like the kind of bringers of, a good reasoning, right? They're not just saying their opinion willy-nilly. Anybody who has an opinion to the contrary, all right, sure, you can say that, they are part of the cathedral or whatever, right? But the thing is that to me, there is some accuracy, at the very least, to mainstream scientific thought. There is at least some degree of truth to mainstream, thought, right? And these mainstream thought doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes out of peer review. It comes out of scientific method. It comes out of all these things in which these people kind of, scrutinize each other over. And it seems like to me that you need a solid repository of these people as a public access in society. You can't just allocate them to private access, and then these companies are forced to keep them around in order to prevent, kinds of other people from obtaining these really talented people, right? So, in my opinion, it's actually good to have, regardless of, the state's flaws or anything like that, to at least have some kind of public, society-wide repository of scientists and etc. who are willing to contribute, assuming that their, safety.
Sorry, you lagged out there just at the end.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, like, it seems like to me that it's good to have a public repository of experts and specialists who are well insured, at least have their baselines met by physical safety by the state instead of a company.
Right, so I mean, you're talking about this whole process, there are specialists in each individual field, and they do their research, and it's peer-reviewed among them, and then it goes up into the accumulators of that knowledge, and then they disseminate it on from there, and so on and so forth, right? Eventually it reaches the public, right? But where in that chain do they gain the evaluation? That's the fundamental part. Like with climate change, I completely agree that humans have caused the 1 degree of warming we've seen by burning fossil fuels. I cede that point entirely. How do they get to, therefore, we must completely abolish all fossil fuel usage? Where did that come in the scientific process?
Well, that's a prescription. That's not a description.
Yeah.
A description is just
so
simply...
how did they get to that?
Again, through expert and specialist opinion, right?
Hold on, because the experts and the specialists, they completely ignore the massive benefits of fossil fuels. So it seems like maybe they're doing something bad.
Are you sure they ignore that?
Yes.
Are you sure they ignore that?
You read any IPCC report, they do not mention a single time in that report the massive benefits that fossil fuels have. They don't mention it a single time. They focus only on the bad sides.
All right. If so, then I have to say, the benefits of fossil fuel is already a given. Everybody can see how fossil fuels are beneficial.
You underestimate how evil people are. And perhaps overestimate how smart they are. Not everybody thinks it's a given.
That's not really an argument, right? Because for me, the problem is that you say, oh, you underestimate how evil people are. But for me, I just don't see it. I just don't see it, okay? Maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe I'm too whatever, but that just ultimately comes down to kind of more personal beliefs, right? Where you believe that people are kind of more inherently evil, okay? I believe that everybody has the capacity to become... Okay. So if it's not inherently, then do you think that people gravitate more towards choosing to be evil, I guess?
Not inherent. No, I don't have any sort of determinist stance on this. These people are consciously deciding to be evil. That is my stance.
What percentage of people in society do you think are belong in this category of evil, I guess, in your opinion?
Probably over 90%.
Over 90% in society is evil under your definition?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think that's the case? I
see them. I see them every day in my life. Every time I go anywhere, I bump into them. And I see their evil in every single word that they say. I can feel it in just the way they say words. They say things like, oh, this AI company, they're profiting. Images, they're profiting. Right? What, the way they say it, it's clearly just an accepted thing. Profit must mean they're doing something wrong. So they're against profit, just on principle. Right? What does that mean? They're against improving human life. They're against dealing with each other on the principle of value for value. They hate that. They want people to be parasites. They want us to be sucking each other's blood until we're fucking dry. These people are everywhere. You meet them every day of your life. They are the most awful caricature you could possibly think of. People say that Ayn Rand's villains, they're unrealistic. They're not unrealistic. They're far too realistic. I see them every fucking day of my life.
I don't even know what to tell you there, but like, I do not. Okay, and here's the thing. All right, could you, if you say over 90% of society is evil in the sense that they are going against value, right? Is that what you define as evil? Like, what's your definition of evil again?
They are ignoring reality.
And what is reality to you?
Existence. Things that exist. Truth.
Okay. All right. So, what is this truth?
A thing is true if it pertains to existence. Existence is the fundamental. It's the primary.
Is this truth that is according to you and you alone? I guess no. Like that you purport to.
I'm not the source of truth. I didn't say things are true which agree with me, which come from my consciousness. Things are true which pertain to existence.
So why would, for example, in an impoverished neighborhood today, where they are unable to get a good education, where they are generationally impoverished, right? What makes a person evil in that in that neighborhood, right? What makes a poor person evil?
They chose poverty. That's what makes them evil. Like, I can give an example from the Reductio case of Africa, right? I saw this tweet a while back where some guy was working in Africa and half their tomato harvest would spoil every year because they didn't have any way to store the tomatoes, right? So this guy, he built a sun drying station, like, just some easy metal with some plexiglass over top of it, and it would dry up the tomatoes and they could use it to make tomato pesto. And the women were loving this. They were saying, yes, it's great for our cooking. Our husbands love this. It's brilliant. And it stores the tomatoes forever, right? And then he goes away. He comes back after like a year or whatever. And he sees they've completely destroyed it. They've torn it apart. They've stripped it for parts. And the tomato drying station is no more. And it's all rotting in the fields yet again. They chose that poverty. A friend of mine, also, I won't dox them or anything. They worked in Tunisia for a while. Mm-hmm. And they've told me many stories about this, where the Africans, they just expect money. They are just fundamentally parasitic, and they will be asking for your money and grabbing it from you. And you're giving out candy or whatever. The parents are grabbing it up. And it's like, well, like, give it to the children a little bit. And it's like, well, the children can starve. I don't care. I want it. It's for me. Right? It's the ticks mentality. That's what they are. They're leeches. Ticks. They're maggots. They have chosen poverty. And that's why I hate them.
Why do you think... Where do you think this mindset comes from, where they happen to choose something along the lines of that, right? Because from what I see, right, and I'll make my argument here, is that there's going to be socioeconomic history and backgrounds that ultimately lead up into somebody making some kind of decision, right? It doesn't mean that they're evil, right? For me, what I define as evil is not really denying reality, but more like, what reality is, but you choose to do bad, right? You choose to do bad. And the reason you choose to do bad is not even necessarily beneficial to you. It's because you are knowingly doing it. And yeah, you are heartless in that manner, right? But to me, I guess we just don't really have evil in the same sense. In your worldview, the word evil kind of loses that kind of edge, right? That definition of intentionality, right?
Oh, it gains that edge tenfold in my worldview. Like, I have a visceral hatred for these people. Cannot understand this unless you've gone through this. Like, it's not just, oh yeah, that's kind of evil, that's bad. No. These people, they're choosing anti-reality, they're choosing anti-life. Choice is the fundamental here. They chose to do this. They chose to make themselves poor. They chose to reap the rich. They chose to eat the rich. They chose to suck their blood. They chose this. And they're suffering the results. And we're at fault for this. We, the West, should donate even more money. We should give them all our money so they can keep their sucking of the blood going. This is astoundingly evil. We underestimate just how evil these people are. If you haven't encountered this before, and you haven't explicated it, and you haven't identified what it is, but no, they hate you. They hate you because you're successful. That's why they hate you. I cannot express just how horrible that is.
So you just define evil people to be, they just dislike rich people.
It's one form of it. Like, I'm telling you right now, you're a Westerner. You go to Africa, they will expect you to be rich, and they will expect that you owe them money. They will steal money from you, just openly.
Do you think that anybody can aggress where the situation is justified at all?
Aggression is never justified.
Even when they're about to die.
Mm-hmm.
Of starvation. There's a loaf of bread that belongs next to somebody.
I don't believe there's such a thing as an ethical vampire. These vampires, if they can't live without sucking the blood of other people, then fucking kill them. Right? They deserve to die.
And does more than 90% of people, they deserve to die?
If they can't figure out how to live on their own backs, then yes.
All right. Well, we can explore more of that. But ultimately, I think a kind of debate about statehood is ultimately like kind of delayed by our agreement or disagreement on what is considered evil or not. Because when it comes down to the moralities of evil and etc., these are more fundamental core kind of disagreements and less to do with a debate about statehood, right? Because I believe that when it comes to debates about higher level concepts, there needs to be a baseline agreement to people's moralities and people's incentives, right? So, what would you say?
So, like, what would be the upshot of that?
Do you think somebody in chat is saying, like, asking you about your epistemological framework? What is that?
My epistemology, I'm an empiricist. I'm specifically an objectivist. So I believe that the way you come to any sort of knowledge is primarily through your senses, right? You sense some sort of object, and the way you form a concept upon that is you omit the measurements of these different objects that you've seen and you've retained their sense impressions of them. And then you are able to oh, hey, when I emit the measurements of all these different things, it's the same thing. So I can form a concept out of that, and then I throw a label onto that concept, I define it, and then I can keep it in my mind for later. I can give you a link about this, specifically, because I've written it.
Yeah. I do have at least a few Zulu fans in my audience. Do you... What if two people have different senses and then make objective, like they say my objective truth is different from your objective truth?
Well, I mean, people that can have different senses, that isn't relevant to whether or not the senses are, sort of infallible, right? I think the senses are infallible. So let's take the example of a colorblind person as against somebody who has full color vision. The person with full color vision says, that car is red. The colorblind person says, that car is gray, right? Is this a contradiction between them? It isn't, right? As when I say, that car is red, what I'm saying is, when my eyes interact with this car through the medium of the light rays bouncing off it, I see the color red. That's what I mean when I say, this car is red. And that does not at all contradict with the other guy who says, this car is grey, meaning when my eyes interact with this car through the medium of the light rays bouncing off it, I see some sort of shade of grey. This is not a contradiction at all. All that is happening here is that I am able to distinguish between different types of light rays more effectively than the guy who is completely colorblind.
Okay, so ultimately it seems like this is a core disagreement that we have, because I do actually believe the car is red and one of them is wrong. And the thing is, I get your point where, okay, some way the way that you see things could be, different from the way other people see things. And both of these can also still be true, right? In terms of sight, I'm not going to, hone in on that one too much, right? But if somebody was schizophrenic, right, and they were about to drink hydrogen cyanide, okay, and they thought the hydrogen cyanide was water. Meanwhile, to everybody else, water is just water there, right? To that person, the one with schizophrenia, to the rest of us, it's cyanide, okay? To the rest of us, it's cyanide, but to him, it's water. Do you think that in his scenario, he's correct that it's water, and that if he drinks it, it will not kill him?
No, he's clearly just lacking some of information there, right? So maybe he's hallucinating, and and that would be a fault of the conceptual faculty there. Maybe he didn't read the label, and that again, he isn't focusing his mind, he isn't paying attention. So that's again a fault of the conceptual faculty. But nowhere do you find a fault of the senses. The senses don't lie to you. They can't lie to you. They don't have the ability to lie, right? The senses are always telling you the truth.
If it is the case that you are willing to draw a differentiation and say, you know what, this person is just missing some data. This person is missing some information. How do you know that the colorblind person is also missing some information about?
Because they aren't able to distinguish between colors, right? They don't have cones. No, they have rods, but they don't have cones, right? Cones are what allow you to distinguish between different wavelengths of light, whereas rods only allow you to distinguish whether there is light or isn't light. Right? They're just objectively missing some sort of information.
You said they were both right, but
like I could show you a red square and a green square. If you're not colorblind, you can tell me the difference between them. You can tell me which one is red, which one is green.
Yeah.
If you are colorblind, you can't tell me this. You couldn't figure this out. Because you're lacking some amount of information there.
Now remember, no, they're not contradictory to each other, right? And in a way, I guess I can sort of see that they are both not contradictory of each other, but one of them is missing information. But can't you say that someone is missing information no matter what? Like, for example, there will always be scenarios where you can just simply say you're missing information. Can anybody ever be falsifiable if it's something that is interpreted by their own senses?
So, like, yes, definitely the senses are limited, but that they're limited doesn't imply that they're invalid, right? Everything that exists is limited. A is A, right? A is not whatever it wants to be. A is A, right? Your eyes are your eyes. Your eyes can't perceive everything. Your eyes can't perceive an infinity, because infinity is a potential, not an actual, right? You couldn't have unlimited senses, because what does unlimited senses mean? It means senses which have no identity. They aren't limited to what they are. They have no identity, but existence is identity. So that means senses which don't exist. So your ideal sensory apparatus here is one which doesn't exist. This is reification of the zero.
What would be a scenario in real life where somebody is in fact wrong, I guess?
What do you mean?
According to your definitions of what senses are, because senses are, for example, you could say that I came to my claims, and I'm sure you would agree that my claims are wrong, right? That that a state is justified,
I would agree that
right?
your claims
Obviously.
are wrong.
Yeah. So if you were to say that, right, how could you possibly say that when at the end of the day, all of these senses just build up eventually over the course of time that I would come to my opinion, right?
Because it's
Now that opinion,
it's on the conceptual level. When it comes to forming concepts from these senses, that's where your free will lies. And you have the freedom to deny reality, to evade, or to drift. That is where your freedom lies, and that's where your fault lies, right? And that is how people can be wrong or mistaken, because they chose to deny reality. They chose to ignore their senses.
you're talking about the choice, less about the stuff that they can't control, right? For example, a colorblind person can't control that they're colorblind, right? But if the person could see color, but then says that, oh yeah, it is gray, right? Then they are choosing to deny reality, and therefore they're evil. How could it be the case then that, how do you know that these people who are choosing to be evil aren't actually, how do you know that they actually have a choice, right?
I listen to their words, right? I listen to their words, and they tell me the environment is more important than you. You're being selfish. That's what they always tell me, right? I am being selfish. I am being so selfish when I prioritize my own life over the life of some fucking seal on a glacier out there. I'm being selfish. What does it mean to be selfish? It means I'm prioritizing me, my own life, taking that as number one, numero uno. So what would it mean to be unselfish? It would mean sacrificing my life to something else, to the environment, to the proletariat, to the poor, to God, whoever it might be. Sacrifice. That is what they reify. Look at the symbol of Christianity. What is it? It's a cross. It's the crucifix. Crucifixion. Right? Torturing Jesus. Jesus is sacrificing his life, sacrificing his well-being. And this is the ideal for these people. Can you think of a more evil creed than one which advocates sacrifice as the moral idea? Not production, not provision, nothing like that. Sacrifice, giving up, a race to the bottom, That is what man should orient himself towards, on your view. This is evil. Who the hell pays for any of this? That's what I want to know.
The two choices, if the two choices are starvation or stealing a loaf of bread, can you really call the person who is stealing a loaf of bread evil?
Yes.
Then I disagree. And I wholly disagree with your worldview, because I can totally see the example in that case, right? Because ultimately, this is what a state is, right? Going back to the statehood thing, right? Is that statehood is, in fact, stealing loaves of bread, all right, in a way. And then redistributing these loaves of bread to people that the state, in their opinion, thinks are,
yes, I agree.
Yeah, and who deserve it, right? But the thing is that I think that in cases where we know the full truth, and in cases where we know what the scenario is, in some cases it can be justified, in some cases it's not justified, right? And I'm putting it in the most neutral terms possible. But you always agree that aggression is evil, that is wrong. But I just do not see it where, okay, I would rather die, because ultimately, isn't that the ultimate sacrifice? Is that you go on this entire thing about how sacrifice is wrong, how it's bad and whatever. But isn't the ultimate sacrifice ending your existence, your source of happiness? Or it's not source of happiness, sorry. Is that what you deem as good? Because you wouldn't be able to aggress on a loaf of bread.
No, it's not sacrifice, it's failure to live. And that's on you. Right? It's not on anybody else to pay for you to live. That's on you to do. And
well, just rephrasing things.
You asked, or rather you said, in some cases it's justified to aggress, in some cases it isn't. This kind of plays into something you said earlier, where you agree that the state can have bad laws, but what exactly is the standard of badness here? What is the standard that you used to say, well, here it isn't justified, here it is justified, here this law is bad, here this law is good? What standard of justice are you using?
To argue for what is justified ultimately has to come down to, once again, my standard is welfarism. It is benefit. It is fulfillment of desires and things on the objective list. That is what utilitarianism is, okay? All these combined together is utilitarianism. Now, it allows me to explore scenarios where you can be aggressing on something, but it's justified to do so. But in your worldview, that aggression in of itself is wrong. So if that aggression in of itself is wrong, it just doesn't seem like anything anybody should apply to themselves, right? You can have that rule for yourself, but you'll be just dooming yourself, right? This is not something that people should be, necessarily kind of engaging. For example, I wouldn't know anybody who would be willing to let their spouse die, because they wouldn't be able to break into a store, right? Like they would at least, even if they choose to let their spouse die, they would at least think about it for a moment, right? Realistically, think about it, go like, you know what, should I do it? Right? That's not an evil thought. That's a thought where you just want to protect your spouse, right? So, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, you said that the standard of justice there is welfarism, is benefit, is fulfillment of desires. Why is that the standard? Why is that the correct standard?
Well, at the end of the day, then we have to define our terms of good and evil, right? I mean, good and bad, sorry, not evil, because bad and evil are different in my opinion.
No, because good and bad derives from the standard with which you choose good versus bad. So how did you determine this to be the correct standard?
And I want to clarify that this is the same way that you determine your standard, okay? So I don't want this reversed back on me, right? But ultimately, we come to our senses, okay? And we live through society and we live through our life, right? And based on these experiences, we build upon that. And that is how we determine what kind of ethical framework that we want to adopt or advocate for, right? Now, you can argue that these ethical frameworks did come from your senses, right? But that's such a dumbing down of it, right? It's true that it did come from your senses, but you're ignoring the complexities behind establishing, ethical ideas on what is good or not, right? So, in my opinion, really, it's something more complicated than that. It comes down to utility, right? It comes down to benefit of people in a group, right? So that it allows me to form opinions such as you are willing to sacrifice something in order to benefit, other people. So, or even the people in of itself or the system itself, right? Against other foreign invaders, right? So that is just the way I see it, all right? Doesn't mean it's good or bad, okay? It just simply means that it has flaws, but I would say that these are okay flaws to have versus other systems, right?
Okay, so the upshot of that would be that the standard of value here is that it's benefiting other people.
The overall well-being of any particular specified group, right, in which you specify the group.
So is anything good so long as it's intended for the overall well-being of these people?
To maximize well-being, yes. And well-being is lowered by bad and raised by good.
Okay, well let's interrogate this concept of well-being then, because there are two fundamental questions at the core of ethics. The first is, what is a value? And the second is, who should be the recipient of values? You've taken this question of who should be the recipient, you just said everyone should be the recipient, and you substituted for the first, right? You've ignored the first question here, and you said who should be the recipient of values? What is a value, sorry? A value is when a value is provided to other people. Right?
Sure.
This is altruism. It's a package deal.
If you want me to really get into it, okay? And I don't know how much time you have. How much time do you have?
I've got plenty of time.
Oh, okay. All right. 10-hour Zulu debate, okay? All right. The way I see people to be on the same moral consideration, okay, are people who satisfy emergent qualities that are not present in other species. For example, all right, humans, for example, animals are able to use tools. Some animals are able to use tools. Some animals are able to, do things that are very human-like, right? However, it's only humans that is able to critically think and link all these concepts together to make something such as a written language, okay? A written language that's symbolic of something else, and when combined together in different fashions, they are able to make something else. I define that all these people to be on the same level of moral consideration, okay? So I generally want to maximize the well-being of people who are above that line of moral consideration. For example, if somebody with Down syndrome is inside of that group, that doesn't mean I ignore them. It means that I already placed their species in of itself above this line of consideration. And so therefore I will always also value the person with Down syndrome, right? Which is why I say, you know what, the person with Down syndrome, they should have benefits from the state, right? So that is ultimately what I kind of define as value. I don't know what you specifically mean as value. Do you mean value in the sense of like goodness, like moral goodness?
Value is that which man acts to gain and or keep.
To gain and or keep. Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
So a value would be something like, my computer, I acted to gain this, and I'm acting to keep it. Maybe something else would be my money, right? I act to gain that, and I act to keep it. And the real question is, on what standard do you choose your values? How did you come to those values? Right? My standard is life. I don't think you have a standard. I don't think you even know what a value is, right? Because a value is just when it's provided to others. It's good if you are just donating to charity. You're giving to the poor, right? You're muddling these questions up.
Does it? Here's the thing, okay? Is that because I'm not some kind of philosophical expert, okay? I only define it so far as to know that I hope that everybody recognizes stuff like romance, um, you know, a general feeling of goodness and euphoria. That's good, right? But if you don't value these things, right, then we don't really have a baseline to work with, right? Because the thing is, or at least if if your list is out of whack, right? Like I would assume that everybody has this kind of listing going on where they have something to work with, right? Excuse me. Oh my god. But it seems as though that yeah, I don't know where else to go from here, I guess. That's it.
I can see if I've got any niggling points.
Because where someone's beliefs or ethics might come from is easy, right? It's easy to know, right? To put it in really colloquial ways, right? Is you have life, you are born into it, and that is how you build up what your beliefs are, right? If you say that your values come from God, if it comes from the Bible, right? Because I've heard that before, the divine command theory, right? Ultimately, I still believe that that is a result of what you experienced throughout life, right? And ultimately, this is how I define where my values come from, is that it's from the experience of life, and it's from the society that I am brought into, right? It's a combination of these two.
I mean, if you're asking, like, where do we go from here in terms of the discussion, I could give my argument for the NEP if you want.
Sure. Yeah, you can give your argument for the NAP. Yeah.
All right. So basically,
because I know some people's arguments are different.
Yeah. So basically, it's an argumentum contrario. There are three possible legal theories that we have. It's the law of the jungle, which is just anything goes, might makes right. Justifiability of aggression is either irrelevant or it's just always justified, right? That would be the law of the jungle. Then there's mixed law, which is, well, sometimes aggression is justified, sometimes it isn't. And then there's the NEP, which is aggression is not justified. It's bad, don't do it, right? The reason why the law of the jungle fails, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go, boop, law of the jungle fails, boop, mixed law fails. Therefore, the only option we have left is the NEP. So on the law of the jungle, there can be no property rights to justify a possession, right? Crusoe can't complain if Friday takes a stick from him, right? This means that there is no distinction between ownership and possession. When Friday takes the stick from Crusoe, he's the owner. The ownership doesn't retain to Crusoe. It just follows the object. Ownership is possession, right? But ownership is necessarily distinct from possession. Because if Crusoe and Friday have a dispute over a stick, Crusoe is saying, hey, even though Friday might be able to possess this stick, I own it. I am the one who should possess it. And Friday is saying the exact opposite. Even though Crusoe might be able to possess the stick, I should possess it. I'm the one who owns it. Ownership is distinct from possession. So this is a contradiction here. Ownership has to be distinct from possession, and yet it's asserted by the jungle jurist that they're the same thing. And sort of beyond this, on the jungle law ethic, it's reason is a slave of the passions, right? Do whatever the hell you want. Keep aggressing. Who cares? Might makes right. This is all whim worship, right? But ethics and law doesn't stand on its own. This rests upon a whim epistemology. right? It's, I want to take this stick because I feel like it, and this also means something is true if I think it's true. And what does this rest upon? The primacy of consciousness. It rests upon the premise that my consciousness is the basis and the standard of reality, that existence conforms to my thoughts rather than the other way around. Right? This is a stolen concept fallacy at its root. Because consciousness is consciousness of existence. You have to have the prior concept of existence for you to even have the concept of consciousness. And that's the law of the jungle gone. Right? Then we move on to mixed law. Well, any sort of mixed law, which is, we must aggress in these arbitrary situations, that's clearly whim worship, and it fails on the same grounds. We've sort of seen this in this debate with, well, you know, when it maximizes the utility, or it's doing these sorts of things, and, you know, I can't really tell what it is, but, you know, the postal man, he says it's good, so I'm going to agree with it. That's whim worship, right? It's the whim of the postal man. And there are different sorts of mixed law that we can have, but they all sort of reduce into either the class-based, which is he who is of the preferred class is he who should win the conflict at hand, or the whim-based. It's he who is determined to be the correct winner by person X is he who should win the conflict at hand. You're more falling into the whim-based, where it's the experts. They determine, yes, you should win this conflict, or no, you shouldn't win this conflict. And the class-based fails on similar grounds. It also reduces into whim worship. And that's my argument for it.
Okay. I disagree. And do you think that everything when it comes to mixed is whim?
Yes.
At all?
I think both the law of the jungle and mixed law both reduce into whim worship.
Okay. Not even tackling the law of the jungle part, right? But I think that the reason our society got to this level today and this kind of technological progress isn't by accident. Okay. I believe that even if you believe that it is a result of mixed law, you know, that got us here, and I'm sure you also agree with that, right? That it's like a combination of mixed law that got us here.
Well, mixed law wasn't the cause of the success. It's the recession of socialism that is the cause of the success.
Sure. So the thing is that right now, and I don't mean to do the how do you say it? The what was the Magnus quo or something? Status quo. Sorry, the status quo fallacy. Okay, where I just say, you know what, we live right now in society, and society works as it is, so we shouldn't be even thinking about better improvements, right? Or even changing it, right? I'm not going to fall for that, right? Because I'm a progressive, right? Now, here's the thing: is that just because status quo is there, right, doesn't mean that there's a set of processes that lead up to that status quo where we go, you know what, there's some good stuff that happened that led up to that, right? For example, if we didn't have that much, rights for any group of people, that group of people would become disenfranchised, and that group of people would also go out of their way to, show their disenfranchisement off, right? And there is still disenfranchisement today, right? There are still people who are unsatisfied today under their current system. But the thing is that I find that number of people, at least here in the US, to have their lives be improved over time anyway. So it seems like there is an invisible hand, except the invisible hand isn't the hand of the market, it's the hand of progress. And even then, it's not even invisible. It's very visible. It's backed up by continuing and advancing science. It's backed up by, a lot of, cross-checking. And in my opinion as well, that we're not really regressing in terms of checking each other's facts or checking each other's sciences and so, right? The fact that we're having even this debate today, right, or right now, is that, oh yeah, we are sort of checking each other's, beliefs, as it were, right? So the thing is that I don't think it's just whim. right? Because to dumb it down with Whim just feels like a big dumbing down of the entire thing, right?
Let's take
Or how we got here.
some random conflict. Who decides who should win that conflict?
Well, if I wasn't given any other information, then the person with the more money and the more guns, right?
And you think that's correct? Like, that's how it should be. Like, I'm asking for your system. How are you determining who is the winner? Who should be the winner of the conflict?
What I hope, all right, is that in an optimal system, because we're not just talking about the system we live in today, right? In an optimal system where I hope everything is done well, right? Is that we have a system where the international community is the one who ultimately is the jurisdiction. So instead of a state, it is the international state, right? There is an international court. There is an international, kind of law that goes around, and things are internationally recognized. Borders are being internationally recognized, right? When it comes to something like that, ultimately, I sort of do want to see that one day, right? But the thing is that obviously, that is just wishful thinking right now. So,
okay, so let's say the international community decides that it's good to kill Jews and that Jews should be killed, and that any conflict with a Jew, the non-Jew should win. Is that true? Like, should those Jews be killed?
No, these Jews should not be killed, but I would hope that in a community where everybody is included, that they would not vote for any minority group to be decimated, right? For everybody to strive towards cooperation and world peace.
So why shouldn't the Jews be killed? Because I asked you before, how do we decide the proper winner for conflict? And you told me it was the international community who decides this. And I was like, okay, well, the international community decides that Jews should be killed.
It's a representation of utilitarianism. I view it as a representation of utilitarianism, if that makes sense, right? It's a manifestation of utilitarianism, where as long as everybody continues to strive towards the well-being of humanity, you will end up with something like a just and fair international community instead of an international community that kills Jews, right?
Just by what standard? Fair by what standard?
Fair by the standard of maximizing well-being, right?
How do you determine that's maximizing well-being?
For example, there are things at the top of the priority list, right? Like continued existence. That's number one, right? And another one is also romance. Also stuff like, having your physical securities met, and etc., right? Now, in order to maximize these kinds of well-beings, these things have to be met first. And for the international community to vote to exterminate the Jews, that to me seems like a violation of what one of the highest priorities are, right?
Sure, killing Jews is definitely a violation of security, but so is tax.
Wait, what is it about tax?
Taxation is a violation of your security. The state comes in, and they force you to give them money. Your property. The state forces you to do that. Right? That's a violation of your security.
It is. Then at this point, you can define anything to be a violation of your security, right?
No.
What is
aggression is a violation of your
violation?
Security. If you initiate a conflict with someone, that violates their security.
Okay. Then in your definition, I think that a small violation of security is always justified in order to prevent a larger violation of security, right? You give to the state something which the state efficiently and hopefully as well as possible and as fair as possible distribute it in a way where it makes sense. Obviously not perfectly right now, but in an optimal scenario it would, right? And we're getting there, right? Because we are still improving, right? As a society, hopefully.
So how did you determine?
Otherwise we wouldn't have air conditioners.
So what you base your stance upon then is that the state is able to efficiently provide security, that it is able to know how much violations of security, how much it should impinge upon people's rights in order to protect their rights. How does it determine this?
by and I promise this isn't just a cop-out answer, but also by the will of the people, right? If the people does not like it, they will show their negativity towards the state, right? They will either vote out whoever's in power, or they will protest, or they will riot, right? Or they'll even overthrow the government if it really comes down to it, right?
Okay, so you determine the correct level of state violation of rights by the will of the people. What about when the will of the people says, yeah, it's fine to lynch black people? What about then?
If it really comes down to that, then yeah, of course I'll bite down the bullet. But the thing is that I would hope, right, and the general trends show this, is that things are getting more fair, things are getting better, and things are generally improving over time, right? Are we moving towards lynching of black people, or are we moving away from lynching of black people, right? Are we moving towards the extermination of Jews, or are we moving away from the extermination of Jews? I think that, we are moving away towards these injustices that we leave behind in the past. Generally, this is the hand that I am talking about. This is the hand of progress, right? This is the very visible visible hand that we see. For example, after the Nuremberg trials, right? After World War II, after Nazi stuff, right? And I'm not sure if it happened during the Nuremberg trials or anything like that, but the Geneva Conventions on genocide for prevention and anything like the Geneva Conventions for that, right? They had that because they have seen the horrors and they want to move away from it. It's as simple as that. They saw an event that decreases well-being, and they want to move towards measures that maximize well-being, right? And generally, this is a good thing to follow, right? But what you're proposing, profit, right? It does not necessarily in of itself try to maximize, well-being, right? Because like I said before, money can contribute towards heroin. Money can contribute towards anything that gives you unhappiness in the end, right? As well. It's not something that will always give you happiness, right? But meanwhile, a Geneva Convention on genocide and etc., something like that, I feel as though should be something that can't just simply be bought, right? It has to be something that is, put in. That has to be something that is, laid down there and established and agreed upon by, the international community. Yeah.
So I want to be clear here. The bullet you bit there completely destroys your point. The bullet you bit was that if the will of the people decides that X should happen, then it should happen, right? And you're saying things are getting more fair, things are getting better, but your standard of fairness and betterness is the will of the people. So whatever the will of the people decide, you will therefore conclude things are getting better. Well, the will of the people said that blacks should all be executed. Things are getting better. We used to not execute blacks. So clearly things are getting better because the will of the people determined it should happen. Right?
Liquid.
Your bullet bite destroys your whole point here. You have no basis of morality.
Is it true that I guess for you, right? Even if you're looking at the Uyghur genocide, right, and you don't even need to bring up lynching blacks or killing Jews, right, because there are genocides that are still going on today that are happening, right? You can just bring these up as an example, right? For example, China right now has its free will to do anything to its Uyghur population as they please, like culturally destroy everything that they have, right? And we can disagree on the facts if we want, right? But the thing is that just for the sake of argument, let's just say that there is genocide X that is going on today, right? If it is true that genocide X is going on today, that is happening within the sovereign of that nation, us as an international community, we have to come to accept that, right? We have to come to accept that negative outcome, right? Because ain't nobody going into China to save the Uyghurs. No one's doing that. No one is invading with a land force to do that, right? And here's the thing, is that this is the sacrifice that we need to make, right? This is a sacrifice that we have to make, right? Because this is something that we have all, subconsciously, the will of the people have agreed upon, right? But in your system, what's to prevent something like that as happening as well? Why? What's to prevent anything like that from happening? So
your reductio case of my system is something that you just said was being done under your system.
I'll bring it up as a good faith showing, right? Because I am here to recognize that we at least allow for flaws to happen, right? It's good to have flaws because we learn from these
But
flaws, right?
I'm
It's a
the one who
continually
can
improving system.
identify that as a flaw. I'm the one who can say that's a bad thing. You can't say that because you said the truth
said
of
that
what
it
is
was a
good
bad
or
thing.
bad is determined by the
Okay.
will of the people, and the will of the people determined that Uyghurs should be genocided. Right? I'm the one who can say no. We should oppose that. We should kill those Chinese bastards. Right?
Okay. Do you think that when it comes to will of the people, I'm specifically talking about, okay, the Chinese will of the people?
That'll be one subset of it. Yes.
Or was it because I was talking about the international community this entire time, but you selectively ignored that part,
The
right?
international
Because
community has determined that it's not good to invade China and stop this, right? You agree with this.
But the international community has also agreed that they are also committing genocide, right?
Okay, well, let's say that the international community didn't think this. Let's say that imagine a crazy hypothetical,
reality.
right? A hypothetical situation where the international community said it's fine for whoever, whichever state exists, it's fine for them to rob their citizens, it's fine for them to kill their citizens, it's fine for them to do whatever they want to their citizens, as long as it's written into law. This is the true situation we're in right now. And you say, that's justified because the international community says so. Why?
Do you think that it is the international community's, they're trying to justify, sure, they don't justify invading China, right? Because China has nukes. China has, an overwhelming military power, right? Compared to a lot of other countries. But the thing is that, do you think that things are as black and white as to go, you know what? There's a genocide happening in China, so we're going to send in a land invasion force. Do you think that is a particularly good idea? I just want to hear from you, No,
I think we should fundamentally be attacking the philosophy.
Great.
First and foremost.
So we agree.
So you can't even, no, what I'm saying is, you can't even identify the Uyghur genocide as bad unless and until the international community condemns it. If the international community accepts it and says it's a good thing, then you have to believe it's a good thing.
Okay. You said your philosophy is based on senses. Do you think that for me, it is also my senses that led me to believe that, hey, you know what? It's if it weren't for, all of these news that's coming out, I wouldn't have even known about the genocide in the first place. I wouldn't even be able to assign a morality to it if I didn't know that if it was happening, right? There's no way for me to know, right? So the thing is that you have to be able to appeal to some kind of larger consensus as a whole, right? You can't just go out and say, you know what? Science is fake. All right. This entire sect of science is fake, right? You can say that but then you'll be a whack job, right? You have to be able to at least relay your opinion to some kind of expert, right? To some kind of specialist, right? You can't just go, you know what? I'm just going to say whatever I want. Nothing matters because I trust my senses and my senses always tell me everything is the truth, right? So
on this topic, I'm the expert. I'm the person who should be relayed these things. I'm smarter than any of these expert opinions on what the law should be. I completely body them all. None of them can stand a second of debate with me. They all crumble under my might. None of them can stand up against me.
Zulu, what's that even supposed to mean, man? Like, what you're like, if you went and are you saying that you went and debated the international community and all of its members and its constituents?
I'm saying I would go, and I would destroy them all.
On what? The Uyghur genocide?
On their legal theory. On the legal theory you're presenting me here, that the international community says so, and therefore it's true. This is primacy of consciousness. I explain why this is a stolen concept fallacy.
Okay. Why do you think I choose specifically the international community? Why do you think I choose that?
Because that's just your selected consciousness. Your selected consciousness to have primacy.
Okay, but what's my reasoning behind it?
I don't know.
Because I've said this before, okay? I believe that right now, the international community does happen to be a representation or a name slapped onto a form, an avatar of utilitarianism. That's why, okay? Because it seems like to me, and I have no reason to, obviously I have, there are things that, the international community that have done this wrong. And by the way, don't conflate the UN with the international community, okay? Don't conflate these. So to me, right, to me at the very least, it is currently the biggest representation of utilitarianism. They want to maximize well-being on the world, right? They want to maximize the well-being there. And for you to go, you know what? I'm going to deny that, right? Because at least I chose an avatar. What is your avatar? What is that, right? It's nothing. It's just nothing. What are you saying, right?
I think it's laughable that you would say that these people want to maximize well-being when they're all against fossil fuel usage. Every single one of them. All of them in the international community. They hate fossil fuels. They hate human flourishing. They hate it. They think we should sacrifice for nature, for inanimate matter, for bugs and dirt and fucking polar bears. This is what they believe.
Why do you think
they tell you this openly. And you still
why
think that they must have some good excuse for it. They don't.
Yes, they
do.
They
just hate humans.
It's probably because they don't ascribe to your philosophy of value, all right, of money, right? Of maximizing based on the market, right? Because obviously, if they want to maximize the market, they would actually just keep on burning fossil fuels, okay? But it's almost as if our moral values kind of line up, right? It's almost as if this is a large group of people who all try to represent this moral value as much as possible, that it would make them feel good if they saved polar bears, right? That at least to me, that is something that is worth fighting for, that it is worth fighting to save some polar bears, even though I munch down on some burgers, right? The thing is that it seems almost as if that I'm willing to concede the way society is right now and live by it and try to make some marginal improvements upon it instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. There's no point to reinventing the wheel like that, all right? Because again, if you forget, right, we are trying to compare two systems, right? Not that we are criticizing all the flaws of this one system, because there's plenty of flaws to criticize. At least I am able to recognize that. But is there any flaws within your system that you would be willing to criticize? Because I have not heard a single one. Meanwhile, I think during this entire time, I have plenty of times, all right, conceded to lots of flaws within my current system, but I would say that's the best one that we have right now, right? That's it. It's as simple as that, right?
Well, as I said, I'm not proposing a specific system. I'm not saying this is the bureaucracy we should have, and we should have this specific bureaucracy. I'm saying these things are criminal, these things are non-criminal. I hate the criminal. I am fine with the non-criminal. This is what I'm saying, right? And this is absolute. I don't care about which system it is, right? And that you're able to admit a bunch of flaws about your own system isn't a mark for your system.
Of course it is, all right? And I'll tell you why. It's because at least under what I am saying, right, it allows for the recognition for these mistakes to be there, right? In an imperfect system, do you really think that, people would be finding about like a bunch of human atrocities? They would probably be trying to hide up as many human atrocities as possible. In fact, if anything else, China is more of a representation of a state capitalist, a capitalist state of anything else, closer towards capitalism than any other, country ever, right? They're very, very ferociously capitalist. Okay. So let's be very fair about this. They try to cover up as much as possible. All right. Yeah, things still leak out, right? The thing is that what you're ultimately proposing, all right, is the way to hide reality, is to hide the truth, is to hide all of these things. But I fundamentally find the issue with that, because you say that people who deny reality is evil, right? But I see no greater evil than the denying of this reality where, oh yeah, it's just all whim based, right? It's all like, oh yeah, it's all like based off of, what I feel, right? Because you're ultimately dumbing down what I believe, right?
I'm not dumbing it down, I'm simplifying it. Because you like to put all these layers of sort of rationalization upon there. I'm just stripping it all off.
And do you think that your system was dumbed down as well? Or stripped off?
Not by me.
And even though, and here's the thing, all right, is that you're positive, all right, that claim that you're making, all right, is that there's something fundamentally wrong with aggression, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That it is inherently wrong, right? But very few things, I believe that very few things in this world. So when you say that aggression is, inherently wrong, I just feel like, right, is that this is just where our disagreement lies, because you are willing to, I'm pretty sure like the Martian candy bar meme was like, okay, if an alien were to come down, right? Is that the example that you're thinking of? Where
I've got a
alien
video of
comes
someone
down,
editing that where they've got the Death Star, the Martians after Liquid Zulu refuses to steal a candy bar and they blow up the planet.
see, ultimately, if you're willing to bite down a bullet like that, then like, yeah, there's I don't get, you are against any kind of nuance there, right? Because you have to at least concede to stealing a candy bar to prevent the blowing up of the planet. But if you cannot concede to that, then isn't that just denying reality, where the reality is, the fundamental non-existence of the human race?
How am I denying that? Because I'm saying you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't be a parasite. I'm accepting reality there.
But off of that, why would anybody ascribe to your philosophy then?
If they're
Or any of
rational,
the
they
thoughts
will.
that you're saying? And the most rational part is to what?
Not steal, not be a
And
parasite, not be a tick, not be a maggot. Right? This is the philosophy at hand.
then I think it's fundamentally irrational to ascribe to that philosophy, right?
Why?
I think that, you know what? Stealing a candy bar is probably a lesser evil, right? Because at least I can define what, a lesser evil could be when it comes to something such as stealing, right? You can aggress upon something and still have it be a lesser evil, right? In that scenario, versus the extinction of the entire planet. The thing is that I put a priority above, aggression, right?
That's your
And
whim.
that priority, it is simply just, then anything can be whim. Your theory is whim, your thoughts are whim, right?
No.
Yes.
I didn't say I feel like
yes.
I shouldn't aggress here. I said it's fundamentally incorrect to aggress. It's based in whim worship. Right? And you're saying, well, I feel like I should probably aggress here.
No, you misunderstand.
Right?
You misunderstand.
It's whim worship, which is based in the primacy of consciousness.
No, it is your whim to accept that you should never be able to steal or aggress in every single scenario.
No,
right?
you must understand what a whim is.
Your whim that led to that reasoning.
This is not a mere whim, right? I didn't just decide this out of nowhere. I determined it through the deliberate use of my consciousness, right? Okay. I'm not evading here. I'm not drifting here. I'm thinking. So
it's not just whim that I am deciding to steal a candy bar, right? In order to prevent the blowing up of the planet, right? To me, I have carefully calculated, all right? And you know what? It's not even a hard calculation. It's not even a hard calculation, okay? Based off of, again, not letting the human race die.
What principle of law, though? It's either going to be Law of the jungle, mixed law, or the NAP? Which of these
Well,
three
this would be the
principles
mixed
did you
law,
use?
right?
Mixed
Like by
law.
your
Right,
definition, this would be
okay.
the mixed
Yeah,
law, right?
mixed
Yeah.
law falls into whim worship. I explained this already.
No, because I disagree with that, because when not all mixed decision making, right? Not all mixed law decision making is based off of whim worship, right? Do you at least agree with that? Not all of them?
No, I don't. Because you yourself said, well, it's somebody, the experts are going to be deciding who is the correct victor here. And you bit the bullet on that. That the international community, the experts, they are deciding who should win. It's their whim which is deciding this all.
And do you think it's the experts who are just going by their whim as well?
Yes.
Or why are they called experts in the first place, I guess? Do you think that we
People
just randomly select people who are experts?
Generally, people select the worst of us to be experts.
Okay. So basically, you just fundamentally just disagree, I guess, with what peer research, double checking each other's academic works, or what the scientific community decides, right? Because you're saying that, okay, since they decide things on a whim, all right, it wouldn't have kind of continued onto now without any kind of criticism based on whim worship, right? I don't really see anybody out there going like, you know what, this is the problem, all right, where a lot of scientists out there base it off of whim. I don't see that. I see people basing it off of stuff like processes, accuracy, all right, double checking each other's papers, all right, and making sure that things are generally what they consider to be correct. Now, what you can say that these methods are based off of whim, but we can just keep on going until we go back to the caveman days, right?
I didn't really see the point in there.
Well, if you can't see the point, then it is what it is, right? Because experts don't just come from nowhere. That's it, right? Because you're saying that people just simply decide experts and then just decide them out of the worst of us, right? But no one will ever agree with that.
I agree that they don't come out of nowhere. They come out of the predominant philosophy of the day, right? Because they're giving us evaluations. They aren't just giving us factual statements. They're giving us evaluations.
And do you think these evaluations are based off of objective
philosophy?
Fact?
They're based off of philosophy, right? Which philosophy do they hold?
No.
Where do you think? Okay, they observe that the climate is changing. Where from there did they get the evaluation? Therefore, we should be eliminating fossil fuel usage. How do they get to that?
Do you think science is just solely based off of philosophy, or do you think that there is some kind of objective truth that is baked into there?
These two things are not contradictory. Philosophy gives us objective truth. It gives us what is there, how do I know, what should I do about it. Philosophy gives us these things.
Yeah, which is why I fundamentally disagree with what you're saying, right? Because you're saying that even though, I can agree with you that, sure, philosophy can provide some kind of ethical framework or moral framework or some kind of reality-based framework, right? Not even necessarily an ethical one, right? Where, people can eventually observe facts, right? And then build up onto a certain evaluation based off of a hypothetical or something like that, right? Or, hypothetical question, right? Like at the beginning of the scientific method, right? But the thing is that just because there's a philosophy doesn't mean that, okay, philosophy that is applied to facts over time, that is tried and means tested, that is double checked by everybody else, is something that is fundamentally, bad in your opinion, right? It's something that's good, I would argue, right? Because it's something that does lead to things such as medical care, that does lead onto things such as, the building of infrastructure in our society, that leads onto, roads and the sciences and all the technological progress that we have today, right? Because if this is all kind of incoherent to you, in terms of philosophies, and it's just people, it's just people throwing their shit, right? Then how is it that we still haven't yet descended into chaos, right? After this while long of, Western kind of civilization, right? We haven't.
I'd
That's
say
the reality.
we're definitely in chaos right now. We're in horrible, horrible, horrible times as compared to what we could be in. This is the common economist saying, compared to what, right? We're in chaos compared to what, right? Compared to what we could be. But on that, I should probably go to bed soon, so probably wrap it up.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's just give our final words, and yeah, how about you go first, and then.
Sure. So, fundamentally, the question is, how are we going to be justifying this system of aggression? We hear the answer here. The answer is, well, we justify aggression because it's a necessary evil. Because the international community has told us that this is justified, and we don't know what methods they use, but we trust in them. We have faith. This is fundamentally evil, right? It is fundamentally anti-reality. We just trust that the international community knows what they're doing, and it's their whim which determines law. This most fundamental of fields, law. What it is that you're allowed to do. Law. It's all based in whim. The whim of who? The experts. The experts. And of course we know what the experts are like. The experts tell us, well, we just need to trust the science. And then we can control this virus in this lab. And oh my god, the virus got out. Now we need to trust the science even more. And if you don't trust the science, then you're rejecting the science. And we need to keep trusting the science ever more, and keep trusting it more and more every day. And the science tells us that we're allowed to lock you in your house. We're allowed to make you a fucking prisoner for years. That's what the science tells us. This is what the experts are saying. The experts are saying that man is worthless, that man deserves to fucking die. I don't agree with the experts here. I guess that makes me a fucking imbecile. What do you think?
Okay. All right. So this is my closing statement, is that I agree that even if we disagree on things such as whim or not whim, right? I believe that generally people aim for these kinds of things in society, such as fulfilling of desires, right? They want to do things such as crossing off items off their bucket list. They want to be able to find people like a girlfriend or boyfriend or something along the lines of that. And in my opinion, this is what I base my beliefs on. Okay, it's the fulfilling of these basic baseline desires. Unfortunately, during this debate, it seems that we cannot really agree too much on these baseline kinds of needs, right? Because we ultimately have a different view of what would be considered whim, and also what it could be considered truth as well, based off of senses or not senses. I believe that we wouldn't have gotten here today if it weren't for both science and philosophy building up civilizations in the past, that we have stood on the shoulders of giants, and that we continue building that shoulder until it becomes infinitely stronger and stronger. Now, some people out there might view this as something that is inherently wrong because there's always aggression happening. But I will always posit that, combined with the achieving of these objective values in a list, and combined with, the building of that shoulder, that is why aggression is sometimes even necessary to prevent bad things from happening. And with that, that's about it. Yeah. I guess you want to shout yourself out, and I'll do the same.
Sure. So yeah, I'm just Liquid Zulu on YouTube. I do videos on anarcho-capitalism mostly. Yeah.
I'm foodshops, and sometimes I debate anarcho-capitalists. Okay, sometimes I do not. I debate all kinds of subject matters. I also, yeah, I debate pretty much any subject. But otherwise, you know what? If you find any disagreement with what I said, I'm always free. So yeah, that's about it. And yeah, thanks again for debating with me. It's been pleasant. And I viewed it as enlightening as well. Yeah, even though we still disagree. All right.
I do like that
Okay.
you show up on time, which is rare among
Really?
debaters. Yeah.
Do other what do other debaters do? I guess.
Fucking like not message for like 10 minutes after the debate's fucking scheduled, and they're like nowhere to be found.
I get.
Unless you fucking
y-
know,
y-
just show up on time and be like, yeah, hey,
I
here's
was
what's going on.
I was actually worried because right before the debate began, there was a really loud sound coming from my room, like a really ringing tetanus sound
Mhm.
that I don't know where it came from or anything, but it was just like this sound, and I just didn't know how to shut off. I was panicking. I was like, oh my god, for that to happen now of all times, I was like, this is very unfortunate, you know. Um, yeah. Do you like ice cream?
Yes.
What's your favorite flavor?
Rocky Road.
Okay. Well, listen. At least we can agree that Rocky Road is a banger flavor. Okay, so there's one agreement out of the way. All right. Well, listen. I'll see you for our inevitable round 3 down the line. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
See ya.
Okay. See ya. Goodbye.
Whoop. And then we'll. I thought it was pretty good. Pretty fun. And we boop. And we boop.